cue me when you think people are all on and we should begin.
Yeah, I think we'll give ourselves 3 or 4 minutes here.
Okay.
Diana, congratulations on your reappointment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute or two here. I'm seeing a few more folks still signing on. And for the folks that are joining on the phone today to give public comment, I just wanted to let you know that all of you have come in muted, and that's all right. That's as planned so that we will be able to go through and unmute folks. I did see someone's hand raised. So after the staff give their presentation, we'll have time to walk through and unmute folks and hear from all of our callers. So never fear. And I think, looks like we've got 51 people out of our 80, Steve. So
All right.
Getting pretty close here. Don't want to be respectful of everybody's time. Yeah, I think we've got everybody. Let's get rolling.
Okay, good evening, everyone. In accordance with RCW 42.30.080, as the chair of this commission, I call this special meeting of the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission to order for the purpose of hearing oral public comments on agenda item E1 of the January 28th commission meeting, Naval Special Operations Training in Washington State Parks. This meeting is being conducted in both virtual internet format and via conference call hosted today at the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission headquarters in Tumwater, Washington. So now we begin with a call of the roll. My name is Steve Milner. I'm the chair, and I'm in Chelan, Washington.
Good evening. My name is Mike Latimer, and I'm a commissioner from Yakima.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Brown, and I'm in Lacey, Washington, and a member of the commission for about 9.5 years.
Commissioner Dannenberg.
Oh, sorry. I thought we usually went to Ken Bounds, alphabetical. Hi, I'm Sophia Dannenberg. I'm the newest commissioner from Seattle, Washington.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ken Bounds from Seattle as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diana Bettis, and I am from Vancouver, Washington.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Whaley, and I'm from Spokane, Washington.
Director Hawk, would you please introduce staff?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Don Hawk, your State Park Director. And with us today is Mike Sternbach, Assistant Director, Assistant Director Peter Herzog, our Executive Assistant to the Commission and Director, Becky Ellison, Steve Brand, our Real Estate Planning and Partnership Manager, and Jessica Logan, our Environmental Program Manager.
Thank you.
And let me add also that our legal counsel, Andy Wu, our Attorney General, is present also.
Welcome all. So the commission is here today to hear oral argument, and we look forward to hearing everything you have to say. And the oral comment, I should say, on item E1 of the Naval Special Operations Training in Washington State Parks. And we ask that you reserve your comments specifically to that topic. The meeting is scheduled to conclude at 8 p.m. Public comment will be limited in time to up to 2 minutes per speaker. This is the only opportunity for verbal comment on this agenda item, but we thank all of those who wrote their comments and submitted them by mail or by email. The commission will vote on the item at their regularly scheduled commission meeting on January 28th. Public comment on the item will not be taken at that time. The commission has received and reviewed all public comments submitted on this topic since it first became before us over 2 years ago. We had be advised that at times commissioners' video may be turned off to conserve bandwidth, but they are indeed following the oral conversation. We now will hear a staff report from Steve Brand, Real Estate Planning and Partnerships Manager, and Jessica Logan, who is our Environmental Program Manager. After the staff report, we will turn over the meeting to Tess Wendell with Ross Strategic to run the public comment portion of the meeting. Upon completion of the public comments, we will adjourn the meeting. Commission discussion and questions will take place on January 28th during our regularly scheduled meeting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Brand.
And I will turn it over to Jessica Logan to kick us off with introduction to our PowerPoint and kind of a brief overview of where we've been. You should be seeing my screen with a PowerPoint presentation, and if so, Jessica, please take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Commissioner Milner. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Director Hawk, and to all the members of the public listening in today. Again, my name is Jessica Logan, and I am the Environmental Program Manager and SEPA responsible official for this proposal. Steve and I are going to try to keep our overview of this issue as short as possible this afternoon so that we don't cut into the public's time to provide testimony. So for any of you looking for more background on what we will be talking about today, you can check out our webpage where we have all of the documentation associated with this issue, as well as a recording from the November's commission meeting where we discussed the Navy's proposal, background information, and the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA. At that meeting, I explained what SEPA is, the standard of review state parks applies and what the process looks like. So I'm not going to discuss what we've already covered, but I would like to provide an update on where we're at. And in light of the substantial amount of comment we have received on this issue, I do have a few points I would like to clarify. First, SEPA is not in of itself a decision. SEPA informs the decision. It is not the intent of SEPA to determine the appropriateness of an action. Think of SEPA as a disclosure process, and its purpose is to identify potential impacts of an action as they relate to certain elements of the environment. And if sufficient mitigation cannot be identified, then it is the intent of SEPA to provide thorough analysis of those impacts for the purposes of decision-making. So identify impacts, mitigate if possible, analyze if not. That's SEPA. Why is this relevant? Well, SEPA asks us to consider, objectively, the impact of human actions on the environment, not the membership of humans conducting those actions. So we look not at who, but at what. We have people who come to our park for many reasons. They enjoy our trails, campsites, and facilities. In the comments, people shared stories of their love of beachcombing and open water swimming and wildlife viewing, and stories of kayak journeys and building forts in the woods as kids. These are human activities that occur on the environment. These physical actions are essentially the same physical actions the Navy has requested to do. Objectively, it is the activities that we consider under SEPA, not who's doing them. So could this activity trample protected plants? Not if we prohibit where it occurs. Could it flush protected birds off their nests? Not if we limit when it can take place. And yes, SEPA includes a consideration for recreation as well. It's question number 12 on the checklist, actually. It asks, would the proposed project displace any existing recreational uses? Objectively, the answer to this question is no. At no time will the Navy's use of state parks supplant or displace the public. The public always has priority. But we understood the public's concern over discovering a Navy SEAL would be upsetting and potentially deter their use of state parks. So we took special consideration with our mitigation and drafted additional conditions to ensure that at no time will a member of the public come into contact with a trainee, with the final preventative measure being the Navy's own support staff to run intervention. So no, this action does not displace recreation, which is what SEPA asked, but what SEPA doesn't ask is how does the proposed action make people feel about recreation? That's a subjective question, and it's a question of appropriateness. And we're not saying that it isn't an incredibly important question to answer, only that it's not a question considered under SEPA. That's a question for the commission. So after the last commission meeting, we concluded our SEPA review, having identified that this proposal has 4 areas that, if left unmitigated, could result in potential significant adverse environmental impacts. We made this determination based off of numerous points of information, including information provided by the public. And we used that information to draft mitigation measures to ensure this proposal's actions would not impact our resources. So on December 22nd, we issued a mitigated threshold determination of non-significance. Our comment period extended until last Friday, during which time we received a tremendous amount of public comments, both in support and opposition of this decision. Specifically, we received several thoughtful comments from the public and from various organizations with questions and suggestions to amend our mitigation conditions and site criteria. Some of them think we do provide, some of them we think do provide additional clarification and stronger language, and we are considering amending our MD&S with them. And we're looking forward to hearing the testimony provided tonight that may further influence any changes we make to our conditions. So for the rest of this presentation, I will turn it over to Steve to highlight some of the conditions and explain the modifications and restrictions they would place on future permits. All of these are mitigating conditions from SEPA or site criteria contained in our staff recommendation. All of them are objective measures to ensure the protection of resources and the public. None of them address the question of appropriateness, which is what the commission will decide upon this Thursday. Steve?
Thank you, Jessica. So as Jess just said, these items are, conditions and limitations can be found in Appendix 2 of the agenda item that will brief the commission on more thoroughly on Thursday. And if anybody wants to look at the details there, I'll be doing a brief overview tonight, but they're contained in Appendix 2 in more detail. So if the commission authorizes permits to be issued, and if we issue permits, each one would be accompanied with a mapped area allowed for training, so mapped exclusion areas. Each permit would require park staff notification, tribal law enforcement notification, notification of local jurisdiction law enforcement. So contained within Appendix 2 are mitigations and measures designed to minimize any possible effect on wildlife or plants and animals. So by inclusion here, we include the Navy's own best management practices. We direct that they will avoid protected species, and we'll do that with exclusion areas. We direct that they avoid steep slopes and feeder bluffs that are identified. They're excluded from any active restoration sites where we may have ongoing environmental mitigation or restoration. This may include seasonal exclusions or seasonal closures, for example, during nesting seasons or protected species activity in a park. And then in certain habitats that are identified per the Navy's own expression, that we would restrict them to trail use only in certain areas. And then we'd also exclude activity from our designated natural area preserves, which is a land classification designated by the commission. With regard to mitigation measures for culturally significant resources, we require a monitoring plan be developed in conjunction with the State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation and our agency historic preservation manager or archaeologist. We require an inadvertent discovery plan implementation, so that if some inadvertent discovery of something of significance happened, they would have a plan to follow. We would exclude certain cultural areas of cultural sensitivity, and work with tribes on identifying those. And we would prohibit digging in any sites to protect any potential archaeological sites. And any general tribal activities, tribally identified activities occurring in the training area, they would be required to avoid that. More generally, for the mitigation of any possible effects on recreation, we're saying right up front that surveillance of the public is prohibited. So the Navy says that's not happening, and we're just clarifying that that's not happening here. We would include exclusion areas around overnight facilities, so specifically campgrounds, vacation housing. We have anticipated 1,000 feet buffer around all of the overnight facilities with some limited exceptions to that, but essentially mapping 1,000 feet around the overnight facilities. I'll show an example of what that might look like. Limited exceptions where ingress and egress of observers and support staff require using the roadway into the park, then that might require going within 1,000 feet. Specific things like boat launches and in a couple of places we anticipate that might occur within 1,000 feet. And then topography might also make a logical delineation that where we wouldn't allow any training within 500 feet, but we might narrow down the 1,000 feet in some certain specific situations. We're prohibiting firearms, so trainees will not be allowed to carry firearms. They may carry replica weapons designed to emulate the weight and feel of a typically carried weapon, but nothing that can actually launch a projectile. And we would have measures to prevent trainee interaction with the public. So, so that there is some consideration for observers and trainers to intervene if they're in the case of an inadvertent discovery or unintentional discovery by the public in certain situations. Public is not to be displaced. If the public is recreating an area, the Navy just won't go there. And then for areas where on the water, the Coast Guard rules would apply. Other conditions that aren't specifically SEPA conditions, but could be considered as well in events and permits would be just staff workload, planned events in an area, or other specific conditions identified by an area manager. In order to monitor and be able to follow up on training activities, we would require post-event notification. So the Navy would call us after an event and say, specifically, we were out there at this time, and offer an opportunity for site staff to review the site with somebody who knows about the training, with somebody knowledgeable with the training, so we can go to the specific site and verify that there are no observable impacts. And then we would periodically report to the commission the level of training, the findings of any site reviews, and so on. So I mentioned we'd have some specific examples of what this might look like. So here I'm showing a draft of a potential map for Blake Island. Blake Island, pretty straightforward generally, with the two overnight areas identified in the upper right and upper left corners of the island. And so this, the blue circles around those areas are the 1,000-foot buffer around that, just mapped through GIS. So we would convey a map to the Navy with any permit that we issued that showed specifically exclusion areas where they could not go. Also on the map are a couple of examples where we have potential biotic detection in the lower portion of the map. The darker blue areas are areas where we would need to field verify the biotic detection and also potentially have exclusion areas there, seasonal if that's appropriate. If there's a nesting season or some other period where we simply need to identify that period for exclusion, we would. And then other areas where you'll see here, there is another biotic exclusion where there would just be a requirement that they'd have to stay on a trail in that area. So, and again, field verification would be necessary just to confirm this. Now on the screen is a map of Manchester State Park, demonstrating essentially the same thing, with the red hatched area being generally the area we would exclude. And the blue circles are the 1,000-foot exclusion area around the overnight use areas. But you'll notice that here is an example of how we might modify the training area, where there's a natural geographic topographical break between an area that we call Goat Hill and the area that is closer to the overnight area. The 500-foot circle is in this area, and so at no point would we permit training within 500 feet, but there's just a logical topographical approach to this. This isn't necessarily the final version of this, but I wanted to show a case where a different kind of buffer area might be applied. And then here we are looking at South Whidbey State Park, which is a little different circumstance with a steep, unstable bluff, feeder bluff that separates the main park from the beach area. So in that area, we do tell the public to stay off that bluff. We do ask, it's unsafe. We haven't been able to maintain a stairway down that bluff. And so we're saying there that that upland property is effectively orphaned from the beach by the bluff area. And so it's unlikely that this would be a candidate for training. Certainly the upland areas would be excluded. So with that and Jessica's summary, I'd just like to leap to the staff recommendation. And we feel that with the mitigations as described, and we feel confident that we have a way to apply this and convey this to the Navy. Staff recommends that the Commission finds that with the proposed mitigations, the Navy's request will not have adverse impacts to the park's natural environment, cultural resources, the public's ability to recreate, public safety, and we'd ask that they authorize the director to issue permits to the Navy for the proposed training. And more specifically, the requested action that would be presented to the Commission, unless modified, would read that we'd request that the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission delegate to the director authority to issue permits to the U.S. Navy to allow proposed training activities consistent with the site criteria and conditions detailed in Appendix 2. Direct staff to periodically report to the Commission on training activities and any issues that arise. So the next steps would be to consider what we hear tonight from the public. We may modify any or all of the requested action. We intend to present to the Commission on Thursday, January 28th, requested action for a decision. If permits are authorized, the next step from there would be to finalize the site review, confirm the conditions, primarily speaking with area managers and rangers about those conditions, and then we would potentially issue permits for training activities. And of course, following up periodically with reports to the commissions on any activities. So with that, I conclude my discussion, and I think Commissioner Milner, I think we could go to the public testimony.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Okay, is that better? Thank you, Jessica. For your presentation. Can you hear me now?
Yes, without the echo. That sounds better, Steve.
Okay, good. So let me start over again and thank Steve and Jessica for the presentation. And before we turn the meeting over to Tess Wendell, I'd like to review a couple of items for the public. So please be prepared to give your testimony. Your name will be up on the screen to show you the order so that you know when you're next to come online. To save time, if the person ahead of you has already said what you will be saying, please agree with them and move on to the next item. That way you'll be able to focus your time on your points of most strongest interest. We commissioners are volunteers. We're pledged to represent the public's interest. The process we're engaging in today is one method we use to acquire new insights and perspectives from the public. Though we are meeting in a virtual format, I suggest that you imagine we're conversing person to person in your most comfortable chair in your living room. While I won't intervene at the use of inappropriate language, I ask you to consider that how something is said can be as impactful as the content of your message. Say what you will to us, but we ask everyone to show respect for other petitioners and their comments. So after I will turn it now over to Tess Wendell.
Thanks very much, Commissioner Milner. So I know that most folks today have not necessarily provided public comment in a virtual space, and my colleagues Melissa, Kristen, and I are here to help facilitate that. So you may have noticed when you came in that unlike some other Zoom meetings you've been in before, you didn't have a mute button and you weren't able to talk. This platform allows us to unmute individuals one at a time to make sure that we can hear everyone's testimony clearly. I will have a list of everyone's names who have signed up for public comment, and I'll be reading the name of the person whose turn it is to provide comment, and I will also be reading the name of the person who is next in line so they can prepare themselves. I know we have a couple folks on the phone who may not be tuned in to see the screen, so we will be providing cues both on our screen and orally. One thing to note is once we say your name, you'll get this dialog box that shows up asking you to unmute. So you'll just want to make sure to hit that unmute button. If you've joined via the phone, you'll hear a prompt asking you to unmute yourself, and then you'll need to press *6 on your phone. Again, that was *6, and we'll be providing that prompt as well for those that we see who have joined by phone. Like Commissioner Milner said, each person has 2 minutes to provide their comment. You'll note there's this timer on the screen, so you'll be able to see how much time you have left. If you're joining by phone, we will chime in to let you know you have 15 seconds left and need to wrap up your comment. We are not taking questions for the commission at this time. So once your 2 minutes is up, we will be muting you and moving along to the next person. We had 80 people sign up today, so we're just want to make sure that we have time to hear from everybody. If you do find that you are unable to unmute yourself at the allotted time and are having technical difficulties, please go ahead and use that raise hand feature, and we will troubleshoot with you and come back to you a little bit later in the queue. My colleague, Kristen Durant's, her email is also available. So we look forward to hearing from you. As you can see on my screen now, the first person in line for public comment today is Jen Micus, followed by Michael Thielen. So Melissa, if you can go ahead and unmute Jen, and we'll begin.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say first that it's good to see faces, and thank you for serving to the commissioners. I'm disappointed in the SEPA staff support for this proposal, and I have to say I feel distrust of the findings. I want to read some words which echo a letter I have written previously to the commissioners on this topic. It's difficult for me to understand why the proposal is even for this clandestine training is even under discussion, because I see only downsides to the activity for citizens, for wildlife, and for the environment. All of this downside is despite Navy assurances that they will do no damage. I live in Anacortes, and I can attest that Navy assurance of no damage from noise resulting from the Whidbey Island Naval Air Station is a lie. It's also a separate topic, so I'm going to leave that there. But being a heavy user, and a very appreciative one, of public parks and lands, And also being a senior citizen, I can tell you that being on a cliffside hike and bumping into a Navy trainee in full gear with a realistic weapon might damage me. And it might be the last time I get to appreciate that beauty. All of that, plus it's really creepy, and not in a Halloween tinkle my spine kind of a way, but in a really, this is really creepy, frightening kind of a way. The mission of the parks is to connect us to diverse natural and cultural heritage and provide recreational and educational experiences to enhance our lives. So if we're terrorized in the parks by those exercises, where do we go for those memorable recreational and educational experiences? I say that military training is inappropriate in our parks and it's at odds with the stated mission of the parks. I say that military surveillance of citizens brandishing weapons, even if they aren't real ones, is the antithesis of this stated mission. And I say that military training in public parks lays ground for confrontations and accidents waiting to happen. Please deny Navy proposal for military use of our precious parks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Next in line is Michael Thielen, followed by Mike Spence. Melissa, please go ahead and unmute Michael.
Good afternoon, this is Mike Thielen. I was born, raised, and live in Washington State. I've camped in a number of the state's coastal and waterfront parks. Please do not approve this. Unfortunately, today was the first of my knowledge that SEPA does not evaluate who's using the park, but whether the park is going to be damaged or compromised in any way. Covert operations is wargaming by the military in a public park that's supposed to be safe to park visitors. There's 36 trainings per campground per year, times 29 campgrounds. That's over 1,000 training exercises. With 20 soldiers and 64 support personnel, that's over 87,000 military personnel per year using this area. We have peeping Tom penal laws that say that covert training, spying on civilians in our state parks falls under this. It's not limited to sexual issues. Visitors to the parks crisscross the areas on paths and their own wanderings. They should not be limited as to where they get to go because we have 1,000-foot perimeter around their campsites. The training area is where the public already is, and the Navy wants people there to be spied on. The Navy proposal makes no sense. Training proposed by the Navy in this way does not support the mission or the vision of the Washington State Parks, period. And using them that way is wrong. It shouldn't be approved. I hope you would say no. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, Mike. And we are going to move on to Mike Spence, followed by Steve Bristow. One thing I also wanted to note is we do have a lot of folks providing comment, and this is a long meeting, so we are scheduling a quick 10-minute break between 6:20 and 6:30. I know some folks on the line were anxious to know about that. So Mike Spence, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm a big fan of Washington State Parks and a very close neighbor of one of the parks that has been used by Navy Special Warfare for training. I walk the park's short lines and trails several times a week. From my home, I have observed what I believe to be Navy Special Warfare boats and divers working in the waters adjacent to the park. This activity has always taken place late in the evening, well after dark, and after the park has closed its gates and its shoreline area. In short, I am witness to the Navy taking effective precautions to ensure there was no chance of public interaction. In fact, without my knowledge of this SEPA evaluation process, I would not have had an inkling of who or what I was observing. The park staff has reviewed the proposal and certified that the Navy has met its SEPA obligations and is recommending you approve this action. The staff has noted that there has never been a public complaint about Navy personnel training in our state parks. In effect, the Navy's long history of using 5 state parks was a proving ground for this expansion request, and they passed with flying colors. The Navy has absolutely no incentive to abuse park rules or management restrictions or endanger the public in any way. They have already shown they can conduct this training safely in an environmentally friendly manner and without public impact. An increase in the number of parks available for this training will not only provide a wider variety of terrain, but will increase the choices available to avoid environmental impact and an already small chance of public interaction. I wholeheartedly urge the Commission to reject the generalized emotional arguments against the military that have nothing to do with the environmental impact. Approve the Navy's request for expansion to 28 Washington State parks. The benefit to these courageous Americans will be significant, while as they have already proven, the disruption to the public and the environment will be negligible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Steve Bristow, you're up next, followed by Larry Salter. Steve, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Steve Bristow with Oak Harbor Navy League. I am part of a national, nonpartisan organization dedicated to informing the American people and the government about the importance of our sea services. That is, by informing you. I am also a retired Navy officer and combat veteran who knows over 20 people who died while on active duty. These are all real people. None were abstracts. By extension, the special forces who wish to train here are also all real people, and the risks they will face are not abstract. You are under considerable pressure to reject the Navy. Much of this pressure is by organized activists. They are the same or similar groups which opposed me while I participated in Seattle Seafair and Portland Rose Festival. But I saw that the Navy is supported by many, many, many thousands of people who are not part of any activism. You will hear the Navy is militarizing the region, when actually many of the parks have military pedigree. Given the current use of the parks I have seen across the state recently, the SEALs will be a significant improvement. You will hear the public is in danger from our own military. Does this make sense to you? In these uncertain times, no place can be safer than with our special forces present. I have seen written multiple times that even our children will be traumatized by the SEALs. I've been to many events, both civilian and military, and I've seen children traumatized by Santa, the Easter Bunny, and even a Coca-Cola polar bear. But I've never seen them traumatized by military special forces. Children know good guys. And those who will train at our parks are not just good guys, they are the best guys. Please support them and approve this training. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve. Larry Salter, you are up next, followed by Carolyn Lancet. Larry, please go ahead.
Hey, Commissioners, thank you very much for this opportunity to comment. I highly recommend that the Commission that follow the recommendations of their staff and approve the Navy's application that meets all state environmental protection assessment criteria. I'd like to make note of and debunk some of the emotional arguments against this training, which have nothing to do with the SEPA. Now, let's look at a couple of those arguments. The creep factor of surveillance. The Navy has explained, and I would point out that the Commission noted that they have put directives in place that the SEALs are surveilling members of their team. It's not a bunch of SEALs running through campgrounds spying on campers. Another comment I heard was armed visitors suddenly coming upon SEALs in training. I would think armed visitors in our parks are a much bigger threat to park users than they would be to the SEALs. You know, the conflict of parks intended use. I mean, the Navy has been doing specialized training in the Washington State parks for many years. In those years, have there been any complaints from the public? I don't think there have been, but honestly, I don't have access to those records. I don't think there have been. SEAL training and parks intended use are not in conflict. Most of the training is conducted at night in parks that are closed or in remote areas of the park that might be open, but they're in the remote areas, which significantly reduces the opportunity for interface with the public. I'm a 30-year Navy veteran. We have a saying in the Navy, train as you fight and fight as you train. Realistic training in a variety of environments is critical to effective SEAL training. I'm the Northwest Region President of the United States Navy League, and I represent 963 Puget Sound members and 35,000 members across the country who support the Navy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Larry. Carolyn Lancet, you're up next, followed by Linda Bainbridge. And I just wanted to remind folks that you will not see an unmute button until we get to your name. So Carolyn, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you. I listened to the Parks Commission meeting last November to learn about the Navy's request to use 28 of Washington's state parks for special operations training. I was opposed to the request then, and I remain opposed now. There are environmental issues, liability issues, and public safety issues, and those are fully addressed in the written comments, which at last count were 3-1 opposed. I'm going to spend my 2 minutes on the facets of this request that bother me the most. Back in November, Commissioner Milner admitted that this request is not in alignment with the park's overall mission and vision, which is, among other things, to provide memorable recreational experiences that enhance the lives of all Washingtonians. And I agree, it's not. The parks were created as cherished destinations, not training grounds, and it's important to everyone that they stay that way. I don't want to encounter trainees in the parks, nor do I wish to meet up with those who may come to the parks to try to find them. No one denies that to do anything well requires training and practice, and we all support the Navy's efforts to provide that. But to open the state parks to these exercises is the first step toward normalizing the practice of military personnel conducting covert surveillance of U.S. citizens in civilian settings. My primary objection to this request is that it opens a door that, once open, can never be shut. It sets a dangerous precedent, not just for Washington and not just for state parks, but for other states and other park systems as well. And if you think I'm overstating this, remember that the first permit was for 5 parks, and now the Navy wants access to 28. I encourage the commissioners to review the written comments from the last few months and to decide whether, again, in Commissioner Milner's words, you can look the public in the eye and say, why no, there's no one spying on you. Probably no one. My Discover Pass comes up for renewal next month. Please don't give me any reason to hesitate before doing so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. Linda Bainbridge, you are up next, followed by Amy Gulick. Linda, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm a bird watcher, and I frequently go to our Washington state parks to listen and look for birds and for hiking, and I appreciate the solitude that I can find there. So I am very much against allowing the Navy to conduct military training in our state parks, which I thought were preserved for the people to enjoy and commune with nature, not for military exercises. I don't want to be hiking, looking for birds, listening for sounds of wildlife, and wondering if there are soldiers nearby. It's just not something that I go to a park to anticipate. And what if I should, or someone else should inadvertently encounter a soldier with his realistic looking gun? I understand that that happened. I forget the state now, but in any case, if it should happen and anything happened adversely, I understand that the liability for any damages would go to state or local jurisdictions. The Navy would not be liable. So my other point is that the Navy already has 46 miles of coast to train on. Why do we need to open our state parks to them? So I ask you, please do not allow the Navy to train in our parks. It's going to have a negative impact on the economy, the environment, and park users. I don't want to bring my family and friends who visit me on Whidbey Island to parks knowing that there are military personnel somewhere that we might run into. So please, I ask you to do your job and protect our parks and preserve them for their intended purpose, which is to connect all Washingtonians to their diverse natural and cultural heritage and provide memorable recreational and educational experiences that enhance their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Amy Gulek, you're up next, followed by Lori Taylor. Amy, go ahead. And I do know it looked like we had Amy on earlier, but I'm not currently seeing her in our attendee list. So what we're going to do is, Lori, we're going to move on to you next for public comment, and Peter Morton will come back, and we'll see if Amy has rejoined at another time. Lori Taylor, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This is Lori Taylor, and I'm a citizen of Whidbey Island and a Navy wife of 20 years. I support the Navy's need to train and understand the importance of having well-trained SEALs. I do find the Navy's proposal to use Washington State parks for training confusing. It's easily verified that the Department of Defense owns over 400,000 acres of land in Washington State. Why would the Navy need to use state parks when it has its own ample lands, many of them adjacent to the very parks they're asking to use? So I posed that question to the Navy staff and the SEALs in their February 2018 open house in Oak Harbor. The answer I received is that the SEALs are looking for a more real-world environment for training, one where there are unknowing and unwitting members of the public for them to practice their strategies around and their use of dummy weapons. So the Navy does not need new lands. What they need are new and unknowing practice targets, and the easiest way to get that is to use the public recreating in state parks. In addition, contrary to your department's introduction, the Navy's application does state that they plan to surveil the public. They do plan to use unarmed aircraft systems, that is drones, in area R6701, which is protected military airspace over civilian lands in the Coopville and Green Bank areas on Whidbey Island. Per their application, these drones would carry, quote, cameras, sensors, and communication equipment, unquote. Navy war games training is not an appropriate use of our state parks. I do not consent to being a knowing or unknowing participant in their military training or their surveillance. They can use their own ample lands for these purposes or look into private lands. It is possible to support military training and reject this proposal. I am asking you to deny the Navy's request to use parks for training and reject the jingoistic arguments that rejecting this proposal is a rejection of the military. We should not have to defend ourselves from our own military in our public recreation spaces. Let them use their own lands for these purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lori. One thing that I did want to check in, Peter Morton, I'm not seeing your name on the line, but there were a couple folks who have joined us this evening by phone that didn't indicate on their registration that they might be joining by phone. So I don't have their phone number, but Peter Morton, if you have joined by phone tonight, if you can go ahead and press *9 on your phone, that'll raise your hand and that'll let us know that that set of numbers is you, and we'll be able to get back to you. Same goes for Judith Akins. If you are joined by phone, please go ahead and press *9. And we will move on to Cynthia Campbell next, followed by Angie Homala. So Cynthia, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I would just like to reiterate everything that Lori Taylor just said. I have the military is fantastic, great for the military, but same thing. I don't want to be in the park and be an unwitting part of their war games. I don't want to be surveilled. I don't want to take my grandchildren or my children to the park and have them wonder who's creeping around in the bushes with seemingly real weapons. I don't want them surveilled. I don't want to be unwilling participant to war games, even if they are not actual arms. And as Lori mentioned, there is a ton of public land or lands that the military has that they can use for that. And it seems that they're wanting to go to the parks specifically so that they can use us as part of their game. And I forcefully reject that. And I would like to be on the record as forcefully rejecting it. And I hope that you will not let that happen. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Next on our list is Angie Homala, followed by Steve Erickson. Angie, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of this commission for your countless hours of volunteer service to protect our Washington state parks. I'm a 39-year resident Washingtonian, and I'm a former Island County Commissioner, Architect, Master of Environmental Law and Policy, wife of a naval aviator retired. I believe that our military members are committed to protecting America's freedoms and independence, what people hold dear, and they do not want to damage the very land and quality of life they protect. We have the strongest military in the world, and we have done this successfully without training in our revered public parks. I've been involved in this specific issue for over a year, and I can say without confidence that the vast majority of people who are even aware of this proposal are appalled and strongly opposed to it. Based on the public records obtained from the commission, resolutions passed, and petitions signed to date, approximately 7,000 people have responded, 3-to-1, strongly opposed to the commission issuing permits for military training in Washington state parks. There have been numerous opportunities for the military to engage with this commission over the past year. The general public has not officially been notified until December 21st that there would be an opportunity to offer comment. It is very disturbing to hear today, before having held a single public hearing, that this commission has already taken the position that with mitigations, you can somehow meet the needed environmental and recreational protections. Because the Navy has asked to use areas of the parks that they require secrecy, and that somehow specifically then alter competing with that very statement is quite confusing. The argument that we've already used 5 parks without somebody knowing about it means that we should be able to use 28 parks is completely unfounded. The idea that we can somehow go and mitigate a bunch of sensitive and environmentally delicate areas throughout all of these 28 parks doesn't seem practical. I urge you, please do not allow these permits. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever.
Thank you, Angie. Our next person in line for public comment is Steve Erickson, followed by Mark Westover. I also just wanted to make a note about folks who have joined via phone as well. If we weren't able to match up your name, we will be getting to you. We will have time for you in the program at the end as well, and we'll be able to get you unmuted. So Steve, please go ahead.
Steve Erickson for Whidbey Environmental Action Network, one of those dreaded activists. Granting this permit is illegal. There's no dispute the proposal is inconsistent with the purpose and values of state parks. Park staff have acknowledged as much. It is so inconsistent with the purpose and values of state parks as to be contrary to the statute. There are 2 possible relevant sources of authority in RCW 79A05. Section 345 allows activities and uses for the purposes of stewarding and interpreting state parks, scenic, natural, cultural, and recreational resources. The Navy's proposal certainly doesn't fall within those. Section 030 sub 5 provides authority for granting easements and concessions. The commission may grant easements in section 070 sub 5 adds to that. The commission may grant franchises and easements for any legitimate purpose. What is legitimate? The context here is the statute. Is the purpose legitimate in terms of the purposes contained in the statute, or is the purpose so contrary or inconsistent it may not be countenanced? Parks purpose and policy are set forth in section 305, and I won't read that to you again. I'm sure you're familiar with it. but it certainly doesn't include anything regarding covert military training. The Navy's proposed activities are so far beyond the statutory purposes for the state parks that they're simply illegitimate as far as the statute and commission's authority is concerned. As for parks that fall within the seashore conservation area, the mandate by which the commission must manage these areas is clearly stated in section 600. I won't go over that, but here again, the Navy's proposed activities are illegitimate and may not be permitted. In denying this permit, you should formally state as much. And I don't know how I can telegraph it any louder, but I will say you will be facing litigation if you permit this. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Up next, we have Mark Westover, followed by Larry Morell. Mark, please go ahead. And Mark, I see you on there, but you are not unmuted yet on your end.
There we go.
Ah, perfect.
All right, sorry. Thank you, commissioners, for hearing my testimony. Navy SEALs require training to complete their mission. Part of their mission is to come home safe and in one piece. Therefore, it is imperative for their survivability to be able to train in the best possible way, and these parks will serve that purpose. I was born and raised in Kitsap County and have never heard of any complaints regarding SEAL activity in these parks. Also, when I have used these parks, I have never seen them. If I ever did, it would be a small price to pay for their survivability. As a professional civil engineer with a Master of Science in Environmental Engineering, I have reviewed many environmental documents in my 28-year career. I have never seen a more complete and thorough environmental document as the Navy has put together. This document has reasonably addressed all rational environmental concerns. Most of the criticisms of this document I have read are based on emotion and not science. This decision and mitigation measures could have larger ramifications since it could be used as precedent for similar regional and national approvals. So please make your decisions that includes SEAL survivability, environmental science, and excludes irrational emotion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Larry Morell, you are up next, followed by Lori Sherman. Larry, please go ahead.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm Larry Morell from Port Townsend. Tonight you're hearing many reasons why military training in state parks is a bad idea. I agree. However, I want to point out that you commissioners, by not being decisive, have caused the overworked park staff to do weeks and weeks of work on a project that only benefits the military, has absolutely no benefit to the park system, to the park going public, to the plants, animals, shorelines, bluffs, beaches, trails, campsites, waterways, and other amenities in your care. No benefit at all. Staff has worked hard to create a mitigation plan to allow for military training in places never envisioned to be used for military training. Why? How do the campers, hikers, and kayakers benefit? Washington State Parks is not a branch of the military, is not responsible for military training or providing any resources for the military at all. Commissioners should be providing priorities, guidance, and support, not adding work that will benefit only the military, and if granted, would degrade the park's reputation and potentially cause damage that might only be discovered much later. Allowing military training in state parks does nothing to contribute to the future of the parks and is causing a serious waste of time to attempt to accommodate a request that should have been denied months ago. You can do better, commissioners. The park staff is dedicated and committed and needs better support from the commission to keep from wasting time and resources they don't have. The Navy's claim of absolute necessity and whining that they don't have enough resources is not your fault, not your responsibility. The Navy is trying to convince you it is. Focus on caring for the parks, not on training covert insurgents. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Next up, we have Lori Sherman. And Deb Ramirez was to go after Lori, but it doesn't look like I've got her signed on today, unless Deb, if you've joined by phone, please go ahead and press *9 on your phone, and we'll work to make sure you get unmuted. Lori, please go ahead with your comment.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay, thanks. I live in Anacortes. I have lived here for 33 years. Our property is adjacent to the park, so this is the park I am the most familiar with is Deception Pass State Park. It is a destination state park, often in #1 in the nation with national park attendance. It has many fragile and sensitive features: tidal wetlands, rocky bluffs studded with wildflowers, kelp beds, tide pools, old growth, and a national park, the Pacific Northwest Trail, travels through this park as well as parks on Whidbey. Families are using the park more now than ever. Even in midwinter, the parking lots will be full most nice days. Night riding and running here and on our island has become very popular, and people may or may not know that they should not be in some areas if they're running trails. It doesn't take much traffic to cause long-term impacts, as was evidenced one day at Rosario Beach Tide Pool, when we lost about 95% of the marine life there with a bunch of field trips happening all on the same day. We now schedule them to avoid that. It is not uncommon for rock and landslides to occur along the shoreline after a big rain without impact, a person impacting. And I know there are 2 middens in the park as well. Given the fragility of this area, it seems unwise to choose Deception Pass. And in the big picture, the direct conflict of state parks missions and Navy training missions doesn't make sense. We, the people, have more need than ever for our parks. We already have the best trained SEALs in the world. Let's not open the door to training in state parks, please. I don't think that the parks get that much benefit and the country gets that much benefit. The Navy has plenty of land already to train on. Thank you for listening and for your volunteership, all you commissioners. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Lori. At this time, looks like Amy Gulick is rejoined us, and she was on earlier. So I'd like to go to her before moving down to Craig Sir. I think I'm butchering your last name, but Amy, you're up for comment now, followed by Craig.
Hello, it's a gorgeous day. I'm walking along the beach in one of Washington State's stunning coastal parks. Waves lap the rocky shore, gulls wheel aloft in the salty breeze. The barks of sea lions atop a bobbing bell buoy echo across the water. River otters scamper among the tidal pools looking for breakfast. I come here to reconnect with the real world, nature in her raw, beautiful form, providing life for animals, plants, and people. I come here to reconnect with myself, a reprieve from the man-made stresses of the modern world. In the distance, I spot dark forms in the water. Sea lions? Orcas? The dark bodies swim closer to shore, then stand upright and move onto the beach, running toward me, too fast, with weapons. My heart beats rapidly. Who are these people? Are they angry white supremacists? Are they trigger-happy vigilantes? Do I have time to find out before something goes terribly wrong? I hear gunshots and drop to the ground. I'm paralyzed with fear. People are shouting and running. Amidst the chaos, I force my legs to move and flee into the cover of the forest. More shouts, another gunshot. Who's shooting whom? Later, from the safety of my home, I learned that the spooky militarized men swarming the park's beach were United States Navy soldiers training with fake weapons, but the gunshots were real. An armed civilian walking on the park's beach with his children fearing for his family's safety, shot and killed 2 Navy personnel running toward his kids. Think this won't happen? Think again. Our beautiful coastal parks make Washington a great place to live. It is unconscionable that we are even considering allowing some of them to be used for military training. Parks are for peace, not war. They are for peace of mind, not a violent state of being. The U.S. Navy has its own military reservations for training purposes. They do not need to inflict terror and trauma on peaceful civilians in parks designated for the enjoyment of the public. Please do your duty and uphold your mission to care for Washington's most treasured lands, waters, and historic places that provide memorable experiences that enhance the lives of all Washingtonians. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. Deb Ramirez, just a reminder, if you've logged in only by phone and not your computer, please go ahead and use *9 to raise your hand. Otherwise, we will go ahead and move to Craig Sir, followed by Sue Ellen White. Craig, please go ahead.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Washington State Parks Commissioners. My name is Craig Sear, and I'm a council member from the city of Langley on Whidbey Island. On December 21st, 2020, Councilmember Peter Morton and I introduced a resolution entitled Prohibit Military Training in Washington State Parks. The final clause of this detailed resolution states, therefore, we, the members of the City Council of Langley, Washington, join other municipalities, jurisdictions, and citizens and oppose the granting of any permits allowing for military training in Washington State Parks. And we urge the Commission to establish a policy prohibiting military training contemporaneously with civilian recreation in the state parks. And we urge the legislature to amend the revised Code of Washington to prohibit military training in Washington State Parks. The resolution was passed unanimously and signed by our Mayor, Tim Callison. Since that time, other municipalities such as Coupeville or Townsend have passed their own similar resolutions. The Marine Resources Committee of Jefferson County and the Jefferson County Board of Commissioners also have officially expressed opposition. This opposition is broad and deep. The citizens I represent do not want to share some of our most treasured public spaces in this state with U.S. Navy Special Forces, who by their own admission at your last meeting have undercover officers interacting with the public without the public's knowledge. You'll recall the chief warrant officer from Hawaii bragging that the woman he was sitting next to on a park bench did not know that he was there participating in a training exercise. Indeed, when I am asked about Langley's resolution, citizens are absolutely shocked that it was even conceived of because of who in their right mind would think to commingle outdoor recreation and military special forces training in a state park. A change.org petition to assist citizens in opposing this proposal has garnered 6,500 plus signatures from all over the Northwest. Please vote no on January 28th. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Craig. Next to testify is Sue Ellen White, followed by Heidi Holting. And so Sue Ellen, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. I acknowledge we are in the traditional land of the first people wherever we live. This meeting is being hosted from the territory of the Coast Salish, Squaxin, Cowlitz, and Nisqually. We acknowledge these people past and present and honor with gratitude the land itself and the tribes. My name is Sue Ellen White. I've served on for 5 years on your boating program's Paddle Sports Advisory Committee. Author Mark Kenyon noted there are some wild places across our nation's public lands that physically move you, creating a tightening in the chest, a loss of breath, or a tingling along the spine. Picture the wonder of a child seeing for the first time in the wild the undulating arc of a sea lion as it parts the water. The large head rises, then plunges, followed by the back, finally driven by a tri-tipped powerful tail. Or spotting the brilliant red crest on a pileated woodpecker as it pounds distinctive oval holes in an old snag seeking a meal. Or going to bed in the dwindling summer light with the trees' shadows playing on the thin fabric of a tent. Watching our children in our state parks, we see these things anew. To so many in Washington, our state park reflects Kenyon's expression of the wild. Not all of us are mountain climbers, expedition kayakers, or through hikers. Do you want to be the ones responsible for turning our state's crown jewels, the public commons, handed down by those who first protected them, over to covert infiltration practice on these children and their families, or to others who are vulnerable, older folks, single women, those with PTSD? Just a few days ago, President Biden called on us to lead by the power of our example. He asked, will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world for our children? Will you meet this moment and say no to the Navy and yes to the long stewardship with which you have been entrusted? I hope so. Thank you. And thank you for your volunteer work.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Next up is Heidi Holtein, followed by Susan Sear. Heidi, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize. I have never done this before and I didn't write up my comments ahead of time. Thank you, everybody who expressed opposition to the military in our parks. You expressed yourselves beautifully and with a lot of good background understanding. I have lived on South Whidbey in the same house for 38 years. I am an educator, a writer, a musician, and a photographer, as well as being a naturalist. I study mushrooms and other small organisms in the forest, and going to the parks affords me the opportunity to study and photograph these incredible organisms and also see views of the water that I am not able to. You know, many of us don't have waterfront property. The people that decry emotion as an argument, for me, emotion is the argument. When I go into the parks, I go there for emotional and spiritual rejuvenation, to feel peaceful, to see beauty. I don't want to have to be afraid and thinking about guns and soldiers that might be lurking. Even if I never saw one, just knowing that they might be there damages the whole reason that I am there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Next up, we have Susan Sear, and it looks like Carrie Holland has not joined us today unless you are joined by phone, and we didn't have your number from registration. So Carrie, if you are on the phone and want to use *9 on your phone to indicate that one of those anonymous numbers is you, we will come find you so you can testify. Susan, you are up next, followed by Rob Smith.
Thank you. Susan Sear, C-Y-R. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you, Susan Sear.
Yeah. Thank you. I love paying taxes. I love public expenditures for the common good, schools, decent roads, clean water and food, public lands for people. I'm an involved citizen. I care about public policy. Sure, we need a military, but this idea that the Navy wants a new and expanded contract for their morally egregious war games involving unwitting participants is an affront to my privacy. My husband, Craig, and I are bereaved parents. We lost our son. We camp and hike in Washington state parks for solace among the trees near the sea. We have always supported parks, but now it is vital. I am appalled that the Navy SEAL training went on for 5 years without my consent or knowledge. SEALs with toy guns spying on unsuspecting campers and park visitors. That you, as park commissioners, allowed it outrages me. And now you're considering an expanded war games contract? Astonishing. The Navy already owns 46 miles of Washington coastline, Please just let them play their gun games on their own land. They can divide up into teams and spy on one another. But no, the Navy expressly wants to spy on unsuspecting park visitors, and that you think it is an acceptable way to regard your fellow Washingtonians makes you unfit to serve. Not only is this contract proposal sickening, it's dangerous. In a similar Navy contract in North Carolina, someone shot another person dead. The potential for further misunderstanding and deadly mishap is real and terrifying. Parks must not be allowed to be militarized. Militarism in this nation is already gluttonous in proportion. Leave the parks alone. Like I said, I love paying taxes. In fact, for years, we have proudly displayed state parks license plates on our vehicles. If you renew this contract with the Navy, we will no longer do that. And we will not visit the 28 coastal parks given over to Navy war games, period.
Thank you, Susan. Your time is up. Carrie Holland, I see that you have joined us. So we're going to go ahead and get you unmuted, and Rob Smith, you will follow Carrie Holland.
Hello. Thank you very much for, hello.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you very much for taking our comments. Thank you to all the previous speakers. I am here as a longtime South Whidbey resident who enjoys many of our state parks, including South Whidbey State Park. My son, who is almost 10 years old, is a student at Calyx Community Arts School. Our students range in age from 5 to 11, and we meet in the park. It is our school. The parks are places that adults and children go to learn, have an experience in nature, and knowing that there would actually be military people doing training in the parks, potentially at the same time as school children are on the grounds. It's just completely unacceptable and anathema to everything that our state parks represent to most Washington residents, including my family. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Carrie. Next up, we have Rob Smith, and I'm not seeing Janice Lorson on the line. Janice, if you are one of the couple phone numbers that we have joined in, please go ahead and hit *9 on your phone to raise your hand. Otherwise, after Rob Smith, we will continue to Corinne Bailey. Rob, go ahead.
Chair Milner and members of the commission, I appreciate this opportunity. My name is Rob Smith. I live on Bainbridge Island, and I'm the Northwest Director for the National Parks Conservation Association. NPCA is a nonprofit citizen organization which has advocated for the national park system for more than 100 years. We have more than 1.4 million members and supporters across the country, including 34,000 here in Washington. 3 of the state parks, which the Navy proposes to use for warfare training, are also within the national park system. One is Cape Disappointment, which is cooperatively managed as part of Lewis and Clark National and State Historical Parks. This multi-state and national set of parks was established by Congress in 2004 to mark the bicentennial of the Voyage of Discovery reaching the Pacific Ocean. 2 others, Fort Casey and Fort Eby, are within the boundaries of Eby's Landing National Historical Reserve. The reserve was established in 1978 to protect an historic rural landscape. It is jointly managed by Washington State Parks, the town of Coopville, Island County, and the National Park Service. In short, these parks are not solely within the jurisdiction of this commission to permit Navy training. The Navy has 46 miles of Washington shoreline they already own, which they can use instead. For instance, immediately north of Eby's Landing is Naval Air Station Whidbey Island. Next to Cape Disappointment is a U.S. Coast Guard restricted area for a lighthouse, and just south along the Oregon coast is Camp Rylea Armed Forces Training Center. A decade ago, the Navy had no permits to use state parks. In 2014, they gained permits for 5. Now they request 28. Our parks represent the highest form of protecting natural areas, recreation, cultural sites for the future. It is simply not appropriate to use our parks for military exercises, which can be done elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to check in to see if Janice Lorson, if you are with us, press *9 on the phone because I'm not seeing you on our list. But Corinne, you are up next, followed by James Christie. So Corinne, please go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Corinne Bailey and I'm on Whidbey Island. I speak in opposition to expanding naval ops training in our state parks. I urge you to reject the proposal, which may serve the Navy, but I fail to see how it can possibly serve the parks. From comments at the beginning of this webinar, it seems as if the horse is already out of the barn and you're just tweeting details like where it can step and how much damage it can do. I am dismayed that you opened the door in the first place. I see on your website that one of your core values is excellence in all we do. What is excellent about allowing this disruption into our beautiful, safe state parks? Have you considered that this could be just the foot in the door to future excursions, which, by the way, we already see with this expansion from 5 to 28 parks? Your vision statement says that the parks will be cherished destinations that all Washingtonians can enjoy and proudly support. I, for one, cannot be a proud supporter if military exercises are allowed on this sacred land. As someone said earlier, this is the antithesis of the park's mission. The Navy has other options. I urge you to refuse them this option, which will seriously alter the nature of our beautiful state parks. Thank you for your consideration, please, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have James Christie, but not seeing James or Diana. It doesn't look like they have logged in at this point, so we can circle around back and instead go to Bill Rick, followed by Sarah Schmidt. One thing I do want to note is if you've got a question about something, do feel free to email my colleague, Kristen Durrance. If you are looking at the list of commissioners and myself, you'll also see that Tech Help is listed in there with Kristen's email. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to her. Bill Rick, let's go ahead and hear from you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Bill Rick. I'm on Whidbey. I also looked into how much acreage the Department of Defense has on island, or actually in Washington State. It's about 421,000 acres, which is about 4 times the amount of state park we have, if I did my numbers right. Interestingly enough, that does not include the survival training site, the Air Force Cusack Survival Training Site, which is listed in itself as 494,000 acres. I am not interested in doing a psychological experiment with the grandkids when they're in parks and they come across some guy in a ghillie suit holding fake weapons. Kids don't necessarily know the good guys from the bad guys, especially when they see people in military style outfits storming the state or the nation's capital. They're not supposed to spy on us. However, they want to avoid detection. And I'm reminded of what happened in Iraq when a little boy came upon a recon team that was trying to be stealthy. The little boy went and got his grandfather. They may not be spying, but they have to interact with the public. Somebody also mentioned something that occurred to me. I would think that the militia members might find it very intriguing to see if they can play Where's Waldo in the parks. I'm really kind of surprised when I heard about this whole activity. It's just one of those classics, what could possibly go wrong scenario. I don't really know why we're even bothering to bring this up. I've learned a lot tonight, and I very much hope that this does not get approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next in line is Sarah Schmidt. Dusty and Nora, if you have joined by phone, please go ahead and use that *9 because I'm not seeing you on our main attendee list here as being logged in right now. So Sarah, we will continue with you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, commissioners, for your service and for listening to us. I've lived on Whidbey Island for over 20 years, and we are very blessed to have a number of state parks on our island. I have read through the mission and vision and core values of Washington State Parks, and I don't see anywhere that this proposed activity coincides. I really appreciated what Craig Sear said, who in their right mind would think to commingle military training with civilian recreation in the state parks. That kind of says it all. I feel like emotion is why we visit state parks. It's to feel serenity. It's to feel happy and playful. I go to state parks to restore my soul and to feel spiritual renewal. One of the things that is a sacred activity for me is that every full moon I go outdoors to be out in nature at night. And it's difficult to find public places, outdoor spaces that are open at night. If I go camping in state parks, I am there. And it's one of the things I really love about state parks. A couple of years ago, I was at Fort Eby State Park camping. I went and stood on a bluff and was enjoying the beautiful, peaceful evening. And I suddenly remembered that I'd recently heard about the Navy doing the SEAL practice in the parks, and it shattered me physically. I began to shake and cry and just feel devastated at the idea that that might be happening. I think there's no way to mitigate that sort of effect of allowing the state parks to be militarized. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up after Sarah, we have Kathy Whitmire, followed by Deborah Wright. So Kathy, please go ahead with your comment. And Kathy, it looks like we've still got you muted on your end. If you want to look for that mute button in the left-hand corner, or perhaps if you've kind of muted somewhere else on your computer. Sarah. Oh, there we go. Next up after Sarah, we have Kathy Whitmire.
Yes,
followed by Deborah Wright. So Kathy, please go ahead with your comment. Kathy, it sounds
Thank
like you might have the TVW.
As a retired hospital chaplain, I'm aware that Washingtonians use state parks for spiritual refuge and renewal. Washingtonians are sometimes described as not.
Kathy, it looks like we've still got you
You're not
muted on your end.
okay.
You're not muted,
How do I
Kathy, but you
unmute?
have TVW going on in the background, is what it sounds like. Somewhere else on your.
No.
Oh, there we go. After Sarah, we have Kathy Whitmire.
Yes.
Followed by Deborah Wright.
Now you're on.
So Kathy, please go ahead with your comment. Kathy, it sounds like you might have the
As a
TVW.
retired hospital chaplain, I'm aware that Washington. Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, you sound
Can you
great,
hear
and
me?
the background noise has disappeared. So we are in really good shape now, Kathy.
Hello? Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Kathy, we can hear you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Tess, she's actually listening to the audio on
Can you
TVW
hear
and
me?
not hearing you through the phone.
Hello?
Gotcha.
Hello?
Kristen,
Can you hear me?
I'll message her. Yep,
let's
I'll
shoot
work on it
Kathy a
offline.
message. And thanks for everybody working through this together. We did have the TVW option tonight for folks who didn't want to provide comment, but were interested in listening. And I know some folks have that going on at the same time. So Deborah Wright, you're up next, followed by Paul Sherman. Deborah, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak. I'm Deborah Wright, living on Whidbey Island, and I oppose the Navy's training in the parks. I agree with Angie Hamola, Craig Sear, and Rob Smith. While I believe the Navy sees little impact of the growlers flying over Olympic Peninsula and the Olympic National Park, I disagree. The parks are supposed to be kept serene for wildlife as well as people who come to enjoy the beauty of nature. The National Park Service employees cannot fly helicopters or even use chainsaws within the park boundaries. How can you design rules that will not disturb wildlife? What is the track record of the Navy following rules? They don't always observe their flight pattern here in Cookeville. And they also fly low over a major highway, number 20, in order to train for their touch and go events. Do we really want to ruin this treasure by the very loud growler training routines and the game playing? The Olympic National Park is not an appropriate site for these training routines. For that matter, military training should not take place in any park where people recreate. I happen to support our armed forces and their efforts to be ready to defend our country. I also know that this can be done while protecting our natural resources. Train somewhere more appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Paul Sherman, you're up next, followed by Marianne Edan. Paul, please go ahead.
I have lived on South Fidalgo Island for 32 years, and my property butts up against Deception Pass State Park. And I can tell you something you already know. Deception Pass State Park is busy all day, every day since COVID. I regularly hike in and around the park, as do many others. The bridge is a high volume destination spot, and visitors can't help but be intrigued by the park and plan return visit to explore more. I also frequently experience invasive, deafening jet noise, whether at home or on a walk. So the Navy already impacts our pristine forest in an unpleasant way. I agree completely with Lori Taylor that the Navy should use their own property for these kind of operations and leave our parks for the rest of the population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Kathy, I did want to let you know that my colleague Kristen did just send you an email with a couple instructions related to unmuting, so we can get that squared away. We've got Marianne Eden next, and I'm not seeing Robert Mayberger logged in, but Robert, if you are joined by one of our couple phone numbers here and want to hit *9 to raise your hand, we'll make sure to get you. Otherwise, Michael Wilson, you are on deck. So Marianne, please go ahead.
Hello, am I now on?
You are.
Okay, my name is Marian Edane. I'm speaking on behalf of Whidbey Environmental Action Network, and the last time we counted 6,500 people who had signed the petition in opposition to this proposal. I want to talk about the environmental and fiscal impacts of the proposal. I think you've been hearing an awful lot about the quote creep factor. It's real, and it will in fact depress attendance at the parks. The parks are dependent, unfortunately, on revenue from that attendance, as are surrounding communities. That depressed attendance is going to harm the park system fiscally. The Navy says it will pay all applicable fees, but if one looks a little bit more carefully, they are exempt from those fees. So all applicable fees equals 0. Now this becomes a problem because there are a whole lot of things that are not mentioned in the MD&S. I did submit a painfully wordy 4,000 word comment on the MD&S. Sorry about that, Jessica. But what is not mentioned is that in order to measure the adverse impacts, one needs a baseline against which to measure. And that's very expensive and time consuming to create that baseline. Then one needs to monitor in order to measure against the baseline. If adverse impacts are detected, one needs to correct them. There is absolutely no enforcement mechanism, so every one of those costs is going to fall on state parks, and that means us taxpayers. We'd rather see that money spent on positive things that need to happen in our parks. Please do not do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna move ahead to Michael Wilson, followed by Joe Kunstler. Michael.
Good evening. Thank you for your attention. My name is Pam Williams. I'm speaking for Michael Wilson. And as soon as I come up with my speech here, we are strongly opposed to the Navy using our state parks for military training. We live on Whidbey Island and use Fort Eby on an almost daily basis for hiking, walking our dog, and bicycling. We are concerned that damage will be done from off-trail trampling on sensitive plants. The park rules are strict about staying on the trails, and why should the Navy be exempt from those rules? Parks are to be a place of peace and calm, not having to worry about whether someone is lurking in the woods. I worry about the Navy personnel themselves if a park goer is carrying a gun and startled and starts shooting, or if a dog is startled and attacks trying to protect their people. Do we really want our public spaces militarized like some dictatorship countries? As taxpayers, we already pay for plenty of other Navy-owned land they could use. It will lead to people not wanting to use our parks. Along with jet noise complaints, it will add the Navy's lack of concern for its central Whidbey neighbors. This is a ridiculous idea that should never happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Joe Kunstler, we have next, and we're going to go back, Kathy, to Kathy Whitmire after Joe, because hopefully we've got those, the audio straightened out there. So Joe, please go ahead.
Hi there. Hope people can hear me. Joe Kunstler here. I'm speaking as a private citizen. I reviewed the permit requirements. I watched and listened to the previous Park Commission hearings before applying to testify. I'm someone that enjoys our state parks. I also enjoy outlying Field Coopville and Concertos that complain about jet noise. In a word, unpatriotic. You choose to live there, it's on you. That said, the state parks permit thing is a hard one. It's one that should require that the Navy stick to the permit requirements. Staff and the board struck a very good bargain, all things considered. It's hard to, as Steve Bristow said, these SEALs are real people. They're not abstract. If they don't train properly, things can happen to them where they don't come back the same or not at all. And that needs to be prioritized over a bunch of progressive agitators flopping and flopping around about, oh, they don't like the military. Well, who got bin Laden? Some progressive or the Navy SEALs? The Navy SEALs got bin Laden. And I think we owe them that. We owe them, whatever we can do to help them out. Let's also remember that electronic airborne attack, he'll provide air cover to get those forces in and home safely. So we should be honored to provide that training and not complain. We should always smile when we know those are our guys. But I want to conclude with this thought with 20 seconds to go. We live in a constitutional republic, and that means that the military is subservient to the elected government. And I really want to again applaud staff and the board for getting a strong deal cut to ensure civilian control over the military. And I hope you pass the agreement. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Kathy Whitmire, let's hear from you, and then we'll be going to Leia Falkenhagen next.
Thank you. As a retired hospital chaplain, I am aware that Washingtonians use state parks for spiritual refuge and renewal. Washington residents are sometimes described as not being very spiritual because we have a low rate of church attendance. However, the large number of spiritual books purchased and spiritual retreats attended by Washington residents reveal that spirituality is an important part of our lives. Our church attendance may be low because many of us deepen our connection with a higher power by spending time outside in the natural world. So our state parks serve in part as natural sanctuaries where people go for spiritual renewal, to meditate, get married, grieve, and commune with nature. Knowing that war is being simulated in our parks will diminish most people's sense of privacy, spiritual refuge, and sanctuary. There is a creepiness factor that comes from soldiers hiding in the woods that mitigates against the likelihood of people accessing the parks as natural sanctuaries. Here on Whidbey Island, the state parks are the spiritual heart of our island. We hold birthday parties and reunions at Joseph Whidbey, seek peace and refuge beneath the tall trees at South Whidbey, grieve and spread ashes at Eby's Landing, and find hope and inspiration in the wide vistas of Deception Pass. It is said that Europe has its cathedrals, but the United States has its parks. We are asking you as custodians for these sacred public lands to make policy decisions that will maintain our state parks as spiritual sanctuaries now and for future generations. Thank you for the work that you do on behalf of our state parks.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Next up, we have Leia Falkenhagen, followed by Petra Kerrigan. So Leia, please go ahead.
The mission and vision of Washington State Parks is to provide all Washingtonians with recreational and educational experiences that enhance their lives. Navy SEALs train for war, which is neither recreational, educational, nor life enhancing. According to Rear Admiral S.D. Barnett in a letter to Park Commissioner Mr. Don Hoke on December 4th, 2020, located on your website, in the event that a trainee is discovered by the public, all trainees are provided PAG with a rehearsed statement. If such an incident occurs, I am a U.S. service member in the Navy conducting military training. The safety person would then end the training and reiterate the same statement to the public. Disturbances to the general public by Navy SEAL trainees is at odds with Washington State Law, WAC 35237-095, disturbances, which prohibits conduct that impedes or disturbs the general public in use and enjoyment of state park areas. Given several accounts of members of the general public, including children, who reported being fearful coming into contact with Navy SEALs in the Port Townsend area, with one incident reported within a mile of Fort Worden State Park, it is foreseeable that contact with combat SEALs in recreational lands may cause fear for reasonable members of the general public. And Washington State Law, WAC 352322010, prohibits engaging in conduct in state parks, quote, that would make a reasonable person fearful. Therefore, be it resolved that military personnel, like all citizens, are welcome to enjoy Washington State Parks for peaceful, recreational, and life-enhancing purposes, consistent with the nature and role of these parks. Be it further resolved that the Navy combat training be prohibited in Washington State Parks.
Thank you. Your time is up. And we are going to go ahead and move on to Petra Kerrigan. And Nicholas Green had sent us a note that he is not able to join tonight. So after Sarah Griffin is going to be Jay Pine. So Petra, please go ahead.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I would like to thank the Commission for allowing me to submit my comments on the Navy's proposals to use Washington State Parks for their training. As a 20-year Army wife living in Olympia, let me start with stating an emphatic no to the proposal. As we've seen in the past, if you give the Navy an inch, they will take a mile. Their last request was for the usage of 5 state parks. Their current proposal is for using 28 or 29 state parks. That's a 6-fold increase and a 6-fold increase in chances of encountering. The Navy has a total of approximately 32,000 acres of property on 5 bases in the Puget Sound area. Since some of these bases are within close proximity of the requested use parks, such as Joseph Whitby State Park, the tide conditions and terrain are virtually the same. The Navy mentions being invisible to the public, yet also mentions safety observers and support staff, and even the clothing they will be wearing to be recognized as such by the public. This does not sound invisible to me. Some of the trails in the state parks are extremely narrow. At Fort Evie, the proposal specifically mentions using the trail from the beach to Pundila Lake. Several of these state parks are quite small. The day and trailhead parking spaces are extremely limited and should be preserved for users with a Discover Pass, not naval support staff. Limited parking is also a concern on the north side of Deception Pass. This is a heavily used area year-round. The proposed rock climbing will add to the congestion, especially in the intended 15-man groupings. The Navy also mentions training after hours and during low usage periods. That's when we retired folks like to use the parks. After hours in a campground, when would that be? For instance, at Squim Bay State Park. My point is that I don't want to be told when and where to use my state parks. Potential presence of Navy personnel take away my expectation of solitude during my recreational activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Next up, we have Sarah Griffin, followed by Jay Pine. And I also just wanted to remind folks that we will be doing a short break at 6:20 for 10 minutes. and making sure that we've got everybody here tonight is able to provide comment after that. So Sarah, please go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Griffin, and I'm commenting on behalf of the Seattle Aquarium, which has a mission of inspiring conservation of our marine environment. The Seattle Aquarium is deeply concerned about the failure to directly address the adverse impacts that the use of numerous additional state parks for Navy training will have on southern resident orcas. In 2016, the National Marine Fisheries Service declared that the southern resident orcas are one of the marine species most at risk of extinction nationwide. 15 of the newly proposed training sites are within the endangered orcas currently designated critical habitat. If the critical habitat expansion proposed in 2019 by the National Marine Fisheries Service is finalized, then all of the proposed state park training sites would overlap with the critical habitat of the southern resident orcas. Without additional mitigation measures, the Navy's training activities in this critical habitat will have a detrimental effect on the orcas. Increased noise and disturbances from Navy vessels will detract from orcas' foraging time, reducing their food intake when they are already struggling to find salmon. We urge state parks to require the Navy to add 2 additional and reasonable mitigation measures. First, the Navy should consider the seasonality of the southern resident orcas' movements when selecting the timing of trainings at the new locations, and avoid times when the southern residents are most likely to be in the area. Second, the Navy should be required to utilize whale report alert systems and sighting networks and adjust their activities based on this real-time information. We submitted a comment letter with these requests, joined by 14 other regional and national organizations. We must act urgently to reduce growing threats facing the endangered orca population. We strongly urge state parks to include the additional mitigation requirements before granting authorization. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Jay Pine, followed by Paula Shafransky. Jay, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much to the commissioners and you also. In December of 2020, the Defense Department was denied the seizure of 1.7 million acres of public land in Nevada for bombing ranges. 600,000 acres of that land was slated to go to the Navy. So this is a public land grab by the Navy. The Navy has its own lands and to train on, and the Olympic Peninsula and Island County, anywhere in this area of the Salish Sea, is bearing the brunt of military training in Washington, with growlers creating hell for residents and visitors alike. Our state parks are off limits for more military intrusion in our lives. If the Navy is allowed access to our parks, a precedent will be set and we will never be rid of them. You as commissioners have a historic moment to stand up for the intended purpose of state parks and deny the Navy's attempt to thwart public will. Just say no, keep our parks for the people. And I'm going to read a quick poem. We don't need seals in our parks, in the light or after dark. We don't want seals here nor there. We don't want them anywhere. We don't want them in the trees. Why can't you just let us be? We don't like your company. We like our parks, Navy SEAL free. We like our parks nice and calm. We don't need your peeping Toms. We don't like your crooked permission to conduct your secret missions. We don't like your voyeurism. It's not right. It's not tourism. We want the peace you don't bring, summer, winter, fall, and spring. We don't want seals here nor there. We don't want them anywhere. Please take your seals far away and don't bring them back on any day. A poem by Whit Deschner.
Thank you very much, Jay. Paula Shafransky, you are up next, followed by Aaliyah Waters. Paula, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Paula Shafransky. I appreciate the time to make these comments to the commissioners. I've been a resident on Whidbey Island and now on the mainland for over 37 years, and I've seen the Navy continually grow and to continually encroach upon our public spaces. And I've also been at many meetings with the Navy where their attitude is, we're the Navy, we can do what we want. I know this isn't a time to talk about airplanes, but the growlers have really diminished Deception Pass State Park, one of the jewels of our state. I agree with the comments by Lori Taylor, especially Sarah Griffin about the orcas, Angie Homola, Mark Westover, and Craig Sear. I think this is an extremely bad idea, especially now during this pandemic time when people are looking for nature outside places to be quiet and to have some peace. The Navy needs to use the land it already has set aside for itself. It's more than enough. And I think the Navy should concentrate maybe not so much on foreign terrorism, but as we have seen on January 6th, domestic terrorism. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paula. It looks like Leia Waters is up next, followed by Evelyn Daly. Leia, please go ahead. Oh, and let's see here. It looks like
am I on?
You are
Hello?
on. Perfect.
Oh, good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, great. Thanks. Okay, so Leia Waters. I'm a registered nurse, a naturalist, a hiker, a camper, wildlife observer, Audubon member. My grandfather was a pilot in World War II. I'm a 20-year resident almost of the Olympic Peninsula. And I want to thank our Washington State Park Commissioners for your services and talk a little bit about this proposal, which is, in my opinion, completely antithetical to the mission, vision, and goals of Washington State Parks. And so, when I see it's so antithetical to our mission, why are we talking about it? Anyway, so this is the SEPA, and I understand we're talking about the degradation of the flora and fauna, that's what's important to the SEPA thing. So the destruction and the degradation of the flora and fauna is easy to observe. How many of you who are listening in our commissioners there and our employees have read my story entitled The Octopus? Speak up quickly. Take my time. Nobody has read it? Okay.
I see hand raises. There's thumbs
good.
up and hand
Phew.
raises.
All right.
Yeah.
So yay. So that's the Frederica team, okay? Frederica is the name of an octopus who beached herself for some unknown reason at low tide on the Fort Worden beach about, I would say, 6 years ago. And there about 40 people, at least, maybe 50, during the 2 hours of time, came and visited. We were in a circle around her. She was about 4.5 feet from tentacle to tentacle, and her head was the size of your head, okay? And she got stranded at low tide.
Aaliyah, just a note that you've reached the end of your time, so please
wait a minute.
wrap your
That's
comment.
not 2 minutes. I'm timing it. That's not fair. That's not 2 minutes. You're wrong. No, that's not 2 minutes. I'm sorry.
Aaliyah, I did have you timing, and we can hear you. So if you want to say one more bit
I
here.
want to say that the destruction and degradation of her environment is absolutely not okay. And it will happen with the Navy SEALs crawling through and submersive craft and all that. Why are you cutting me short? I'm shocked. I've had 35 seconds is what I've talked. I'm shocked because you don't want to hear this, maybe. The thing on the thing says 1 minute and 28 seconds left.
I just hit reset, Aaliyah, on the timer.
Yeah.
So
okay. So how much time do I have left?
you've reached your 2-minute point.
I don't think so, dear. I've got a clock right in front of me with a second hand. I'm a registered nurse. I've listened to heartbeats all my life. No, I have 30 seconds left.
Please go ahead.
So, okay. So this whole thing is why? Why are you the staff of the park, who I employ with my tax money? Why are you following up? This is an emperor's new clothes situation. Okay, it's obvious that any military activity in the park is going to degrade the flora and fauna, and that means Frederica's environment. So what's behind it? I want an investigation of why this Navy proposal is even being considered by park staff. I think that is absolutely not right, when it is so antithetical to the very notion of a state park and why that park was supported by taxpayer money for decades. I'm the taxpayer. My grandparents were the taxpayers. We are all taxpayers. Staff is our employee. Do not do this. Let us know why. We need an investigation of why this is an issue. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Aaliyah. Next up, we have Evelyn Daly, followed by Jeremy Cornish. Evelyn, please go ahead. And Evelyn, it looks like we've still got you muted. All right. Evelyn, Kristen will reach out and we'll make sure to get the audio figured out for you here. And in the meantime, let's go over to Jeremy Cornish. So don't worry, Evelyn, we will come back to you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, thanks for having me and thanks for opening this up. I've heard good points on both sides, and I would say that there's been talk about emotional arguments, and I think it's good to note that both sides have emotions vested into this argument. You know, there's obviously a lot more kind of poetic and artistic stuff coming from the opposite side, but even the you know, the angle of the troops need training, they're brave, and, you know, we don't want them to die, obviously conjures emotions too. So we need to be equanimous, I don't know, about that and make sure that we take the emotion out of it for both sides. I think everybody can agree on one thing, is that we don't want our troops jeopardized, and that military training is highly important. And we already have, you know, quite a worldwide reputation with the SEALs. They are like top of the line people, and they don't get that way on accident. I think the issue here is whether or not military training in the state parks is appropriate. And I feel like I agree enough with the people who've already spoken out against that, that I don't need to beat a dead horse. What I will say though, is that two things. One is that we need to consider second and third order consequences, which means the long-term effects of any decision you make today. One is setting precedents, obviously, but another thing has to do with, yes, environmental impacts and tourism, people maybe being squeamish about even visiting some of the state parks and all that. But another is, you know, really things that may seem far-fetched, like once you have open military trainings in places, you have the potential to attract bad guys who want to come and learn about that. And I know this sounds like a movie or something, but you need to think into the future. I think that's one. And, you know, if we were to reverse the roles, I like to look at mushrooms in the state parks. And if I were to go to the Navy base and say, hey, I think you have wonderful mushrooms here, may I be allowed to come onto your base and walk around and look at those? I don't think I would even get a hearing or any kind of audience at all. So I would like to vote no on this one. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. I don't think I'm seeing that Zoe Hill, David Adams, Tom Ewell, or Vicki Robin have joined us tonight. Zoe, David, Tom, or Vicki, if you are one of the phone numbers that we have on here that we didn't have connected to your registration info, do go ahead and press *9 on the phone, and we'll go ahead and get you unmuted. And let's go to Forrest Schomer next, followed by Lee Rebman. Forrest, Melissa, if you can go ahead and get them unmuted.
Commissioners, I speak as the founding president of Friends of Fort Worden almost 30 years ago, one of the first two Friends groups in the state. I've lived within walking distance of multiple state parks near Admiralty Inlet for the past 40 plus years. I was one of the few citizens to appear before you live at the Evergreen State Fairgrounds in Monroe 5 years ago when a very similar proposal came up, which you rejected. The current proposal, again, doesn't make the case that only these parks can offer training opportunities not already available among those 46 miles that we've referred to, many speakers, shoreline the Navy has. And the Navy would never consider allowing public use of those restricted shores. Locally here in Port Townsend Bay, essentially all of Indian Island is held by the Navy. There's no conceivable difference between the shoreline of Indian Island and any of the nearby parks, Flagler, Townsend, Warden, and Casey. We know from experience that a request for use between 3 and 36 times intends to maximize the permitted number. 3 intentionally lowballs the true intent, is the proverbial camel's nose under the tent. Among parks that are former military bases, even earlier, these locations were inhabited by Native people for millennia who were preempted when the sites were taken for military use over 100 years ago. For many decades, these parks have been returned to the public for recreation, culture, spiritual, peaceable activities. We volunteers who have worked for decades to regain the natural qualities of these parks and bring them to their highest and best condition, in my case, continuously every year beginning in 1993, ask you to maintain protection against uses that could detract. And lastly, I'd like to mention that all of the women who have spoken before me are opposed to this project. Consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Forrest. I am not seeing Lee Rebman. Oh, there we go. Lee is on. Fantastic. Lee, if you would like to go ahead and unmute yourself, we'll hear from you, followed by Craig Platt.
Okay. First of all, I would like to congratulate the commissioners. There's many forms of courage, and they're showing a form of courage by letting the Navy train. One of the big benefits for the Navy is to be able to have many different environments to train in, and that's why the variety helps them greatly for the SEAL training. Also, I'm very surprised by the very highly emotional and extremely selfish, very self-centered and theatrical presentations that I've been listening to this evening. And it seems pretty obviously that there's a strong amount of anti-military, and also these people seem to be in their own virtual reality. I've heard a lot of lies and half-truths, and it's nice if I had more time, which I don't, to be able to go and countermand a lot of things that I've been hearing this evening. But I especially wanted to compliment those staff, because the staff studies seem to be based on a very rational basis and not emotion. And I just wanted to compliment staff on that and what they did. And also that it seems fairly obvious that the same talking points are being told over and over again from groups like the Whidbey Environmental Action Network. I happen to be a resident of Whidbey Island also, and I am very strongly in favor of the Navy proposal. And that's all I really need to say. I guess the only other thing to maybe add a little bit of humor is, I think some of these people have been going out in the woods and eating too many mushrooms. So Anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Lee. Next up, we've got Craig Platt, followed by Karen Anderson. Craig, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Craig Platt. I'm a lawyer in Coopville and I support the Navy, but I oppose this training. Why? I'm going to give the last caller his rational analysis. Let's look at the MD&S from a legal point of view. It does not say what the commission staff falsely claim, including the commissioner. No offense. Read it. You're relying on an incorrect analysis of the language. The MD&S provides no real controls or protections. It doesn't say do not or may not. It says avoid and mitigate. Avoid's not a real thing in the law. That's what they taught me at Stanford. Jessica talks about not who, what. Huh? I ask why. Why do this at all? That's the central question. But back to the MD&S. There's no real time, eyes on, direct oversight. None. No prohibition, only avoid and mitigate. If you mess it up, try to minimize that. What if they don't avoid? No punishment, no sanction, no before-after inspection, no way to check it, no way to measure it. Therefore, no real controls before, during, after. Avoid's not a thing. The guidelines are worthless, but still, why? If my neighbor wants to throw a party, I don't do an environmental impact statement. If he wants to throw it in my yard, I say use your yard. I don't want the damage. I'm not going to measure it. The Navy has the property. They should use their backyard. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Craig. And it looks like Tom Ewell is logged in now. So Tom, if you would like to go ahead and provide your comment now, and then we'll move on to Karen Anderson.
Again, thank you very much for the opportunity for the public to address this issue. I have been following this issue for some time. I've gone to a couple of hearings that the Navy has provided and the commissioners have provided. And I'm not convinced that it's necessary at all that the Navy have access to our borders. Our state parks are public refuges where people enjoy recreational activities, commune with nature. We've spoken about those things. And we believe that the Navy SEALs arriving in boats and submersibles, dressed in combat gear, doing insertion, extraction, surveillance, all those things are simply not a part of our spiritual sanctuary that people rely on for our state parks. The Navy SEALs have a new 60-acre Pacific Ocean complex in San Diego County that adds 1.5 million square feet of coastal development. They also have access to 29,819,492 acres of Department of Defense lands in the US that includes 438,938 acres in Washington State and over 43 miles of Washington marine coastline. No one has satisfactorily explained, I don't believe, the necessity of this, what we get in exchange, and I'm opposed to allowing the SEALs access to our state parks in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. We've got Karen Anderson next, and then we are going to have our 10-minute break, and that resumes at 6:30. So Karen, please go ahead and we will work on making sure everyone gets their full-time after our break and after Karen. So thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to address you. My name is Karen Anderson and I live in Port Townsend, just 4 blocks walking distance from Fort Worden. As someone who uses this and other state parks on a daily basis, I'm strongly opposed to the use of public state lands for military training purposes. In addition to being a resident, I'm also a professional planner and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, and I provided a letter detailing both the inaccuracies contained in the Navy's SEPA checklist, as well as the insufficiencies of the mitigation measures in the MDNS, much as described by Mr. Platt previously. But I want to primarily focus on the policies of this commission as they are expressed in the recently adopted 2021-31 strategic plan. Nowhere in the mission, vision, or strategies of this plan does it state that state parks should be used as military training facilities. I know that this commission must rely on existing laws and policies to inform their decisions and not just respond to public opposition to any given project. People are emotional about this, and understandably so, but you have ample statutory and policy reasons to deny this permit. Indeed, had I been staff recommending this project to you, I would have recommended denial. Given that this is the case, I do not see how you can, in good conscience, approve the Navy's request, as it is in direct conflict with your own strategic plan and constitutes an incompatible land use for purposes of SEPA. I urge you to deny the application for right of entry. I respect the Navy's mission for training, but I wish the Navy would respect your mission for providing peaceful places of recreation in the state parks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. As mentioned before, we will now pause for a 10-minute break. Let folks get a quick bite for dinner, and we will resume public comment at 6:30. And when we come back at 6:30, we are going to have Lori Riley, followed by Lang Russell. Thank you.
Tess, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I've got an email from somebody that's participating in this wanting to know if we're going to make any time available for people who have not signed up to testify if we are finished with the pre-signed folks before 8 o'clock. You might want to address that when we reconvene.
Commissioner Brown, I responded to both of you already. This is Becky. Just as an FYI.
Yeah, and unfortunately we did close registration, so it wouldn't really be fair. I am going to work to make sure that some of our folks on the phone, if they aren't showing up with their name, we'll make sure to get those guys in. But we did have a set sign up period for public comment. And we are approaching the 6:30 hour. So if commissioners want to put their videos back on, and I'm gonna go ahead and get back to our list of folks where we have Lori Riley up next, and it doesn't look like Lang Russell has joined. Lang, if you are one of the couple phone numbers that we have here, go ahead and use *9 to indicate one of those phone numbers. Otherwise, after Lori, we will move on to Ann Linnea. So Lori, please go ahead with your comment.
I'm Lori Riley from Port Townsend. Article 1, Section 18 of the Washington State Constitution states, quote, "The military shall be in strict subordination to the civil power," unquote. And I think that that should be paid attention to in your deliberations. The Navy, as it's been stated, owns miles of shoreline in the Puget Sound, but it hasn't been mentioned that they also have use of privately owned shoreline properties on which they have permission to train. So why would they need 28 state parks as well, even though the state park shoreline is identical to what they already have? Because the parks are where the public is, and that's the only difference. So even though you say you'll be prohibiting surveillance of the public, a Navy Special Ops trainer at the Navy's own event at the Blue Heron Middle School in Port Townsend stated that the training is specifically for surveillance of the public as the surrogate enemy, and that's the term he used. And the parks, quote, "The parks are where the people are," unquote. Furthermore, the Navy's application states, and I quote, "Trainees would use observation techniques," unquote. So even if we were mistaken, the fear and emotion are real and valid and will negatively impact park usage. And I'd also like to say that emotion is not stupidity. Previous Regional Commander Rear Admiral Gray and Rear Admiral Barnett have both mentioned that the Navy has trained covertly in the state parks for 30 years. Where was their application? I don't think they're honest. We can't trust them. Say no. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lori. Let's go ahead and move to Ann Linnea. Phil Son, I'm not seeing you on the list, so if for some reason you're one of those phone numbers, do raise your hand and we will probably end up moving to Seth Rowland next. So Ann, please go ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. I agree with all of those who have spoken that this proposal is completely in congruence with the stated mission of our Washington state parks. The often expressed creep factor about allowing Navy soldiers to sneak around to practice non-detection in our parks is not only incongruent with the Parks Commission's stated intention, it is dangerous for two reasons. One, there are several extremist paramilitary practicing secretly on state lands, maybe not state parks, but state lands, we don't know. If we saw someone in fatigues, how would we know the difference? Some of your park users carry guns. What if they draw a gun in self-defense? This is potentially very dangerous in these turbulent times. Secondly, and several people have spoken about this, women always fear for our safety in the woods. With this in place, most of us would go into the woods with a lot of added fear in our hearts, if we would go at all. The idea that they would be undetected is ridiculous. My little dog would absolutely know if someone is sneaking around within a 100-foot radius of me. Finally, a story for you that brings in emotion, which is very important to your park users. In 2019, we took our 2 Los Angeles grandchildren camping at Bowman Bay State Park in August. We went down to the beach at 10 o'clock at night to see the bioluminescence. It was absolutely magical. My LA granddaughter is very afraid of the woods in the dark. This was a huge step for her. I would have to tell her that we could see soldiers sneaking around in the woods or coming out of the water.
Hi, Anne, your time is up.
Thank you.
If you go.
She would never go under those circumstances.
Thank you very much, Anne. And we're going to move on to Seth Rowland, followed by Marlene Finley. Again, Phil Son, I'm not seeing you, but if you are on via phone and we can't see your name on there, please go ahead and press *9 and we'll get you unmuted. Seth, please go ahead.
Thank you all for serving on the Parks Commission. I know you do it because you love the parks as much as I do. And I look to the parks as a refuge in this crazy world. First, I'd like to challenge the idea that a 1,000-foot exclusion zone around a campground is enough. For 20 years, I've camped in state parks with groups of kids, and we always go on night hikes. It's a highlight of every trip. 1,000 feet is 2/10 of a mile, and most people can walk it in 4 minutes. Will campers be informed that if they wander more than 4 minutes from camp, they might end up in a military incursion? I walk off trail frequently, silently observing eagles, other wildlife, and campers wander the park at night. There is not a time or place in our state parks where the military can train and be guaranteed to be unseen and unheard. A SIPO will show that a peeping Tom has no impact. Technically, they take nothing, and have so little impact you don't even know they're there. Yet the fear and creepiness they create are very real. The Navy says it won't surveil people. How can you promise to avoid people if you don't watch them? Many others have pointed out how much shoreline the military has, and obviously that what they need from parks is the people. There's a clear and simple solution. The Navy should open Indian Island and its other lands to recreation on the days they want to train. This isn't a flippant suggestion. Indian Island has often had a 5K public run there, and people who go will not be surprised if they see armed soldiers. Fear and public enjoyment are incompatible. I appreciate that you're required to consider this request by the military, but also that you are not required to grant it. You are state parks commissioners. Please protect our parks. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Seth. Next up, we have Marlene Finley, followed by Carol Borden. Marlene, please go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Marlene Finley, and I live in Anacortes, Washington. Tonight, I am speaking on behalf of Evergreen Islands, a nonprofit environmental organization in Skagit County. Evergreen Islands is opposed to the Navy conducting special operations training in Washington state parks because it's in direct conflict with the parks system's mission and vision. In the commission's own words, these are the most treasured lands, waters, and historic places in our state. I'm retired after 35 years of U.S. Forest Service and National Park Service, and I worked on many special use permits during my career in public land management. What shocks me about this proposal is the scope and scale of the Navy's request to conduct training in 28 parks as much as 36 times a year, with as many as 84 trainees and support staff on site at one time, according to the application. Part of the process in considering uses in parks is applying screening criteria, which includes determining whether or not a use can take place in areas outside of a park. This proposal should have been denied during screening because it's contrary to park mission and it can be done outside of parks, and it would have saved a lot of money in environmental assessments and SEPA. I live near Deception Pass State Park and often visit the park to hike, kayak, and take photographs. It's a special place I've found to lift my spirits during the pandemic. Why in the world would you consider adding more military impacts in a park which is subject to growler jet noise on a regular basis to the point where people pull up their tents and leave? At your November meeting, Jessica explained how each park's individual and that planners were considering exclusions, that is identifying certain parts of parks which would be off the table because of existing high use levels within the parks that make them unsuitable as training grounds. But I can't find the parks that were excluded in your documents. In conclusion, this training is not appropriate in state parks. Please take care of our most cherished places. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marlene. I am not actually seeing Carol in our attendee list, so I'm going to move forward to George Rehnquist, followed by Charlene Rehnquist. So let's go ahead and hear from George.
Thank you. I support the Navy's plan to expand locations for military exercises on Washington beaches and parks. Bear in mind, freedom is not free. My father flew on a B-17 in World War II. I'm a decorated combat Marine who served this country in Vietnam. My son, a former Marine Corps helicopter pilot. My son-in-law, a West Point graduate, and a nephew who is currently a candidate for West Point. We are 4 generations of military patriot. All of us owe our mission successes and our survival to extensive training. Opposition statements cite military training as an intrusive, causing damage and refuse left on public property. For 4 decades, I have visited Washington state parks and public beaches. Sadly, I've witnessed public trash, liquor bottles, drug needles, spent condoms, and extensive vandalism for park personnel to have to clean up or repair. In talking to those who have invited SEALs training on their private property, found the SEALs were far more respectful than the general public. In fact, recounting their experience, their property was so pristine after the SEALs left, they didn't know the SEALs had come and gone. This issue is an excellent reminder to all American citizens and political parties of how much the United States military Navy contributes to our local communities with jobs, revenues, taxes, growth, school systems, economies, and way of life. I express my wholehearted support back to the Navy's request for personnel to engage in naval special ops training at any additional locations within Washington state. My wife and I have previously offered our beachfront property in the San Juan Islands for a potential SEALs training. That offer still stands. We may have been visited. We never know it. These young people, men and women.
Hi, George, your time is up.
Okay. The Navy should be granted right of permit.
And just so folks know, Charlene and George are at the same line, in case that wasn't obvious. So Charlene, please continue.
Okay, the Navy should be granted right of permit to continue training on state parks and public land. I am a local Native American and an elder in my Suquamish tribe. I am not an uninformed Indigenous person as inferred by a WEAN member. I read the Navy's public announcements, emails with other tribal members, and discussed this with some of our honored tribal veterans, the Suquamish Warriors. I attended the Paulsbo May 2017 meeting, which was but one of numerous Navy public forums in the surrounding areas. I had the opportunity to personally meet SEAL members, learn more about what it takes to become one of their elite and their unwavering dedication. This venue allowed factual dissemination regarding environmental impact studies, procedures, and the opportunity to voice any concerns. Also, Navy training would not be conducted on any tribal property without the explicit consent of the tribe. My father, uncles, and numerous cousins in all branches of the military served in World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, and recently the Middle East. My grandfather, Benny George, was one of the first applicants at the Keyport Torpedo Station and was assigned badge number 17. After military service, several family members continued careers at Bremerton Naval Shipyard, Keyport, and Bangor Subbase. My husband was a combat Marine in Vietnam. Additionally, I have a cousin whose name is engraved at the Pearl Harbor, Arizona Memorial as one soul lost that fateful day. We are multi-generations of responsible patriots. We enjoy all freedoms due to selfless dedication of these young SEAL men and women. Their bravery is legendary. The very least this commission can do is to assist these heroes by providing a venue to achieve their mission and protecting our freedoms. Hak Shlakwel OCC Ab. Good day, honorable persons.
Thank you very much, Charlene. Next up, we have Diana Law, and we are going to follow Diana up with Diana Lindsay, who was not logged in earlier, but was listed earlier in our comment lineup. So Diana Law, followed by Diana Lindsay, and then Peter Guerrero, you'll be up next. Diana Law, please go ahead.
Unmute. Okay, sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute. My name is Diana Law. I have worked on some native restoration projects here in the Pacific Northwest with the Beacon Food Forest, with a wetlands restoration, and for Bastyr University, I was the lead on a native habitat restoration. And I can say that those environments are fairly fragile, so it's hard to understand how they could have troops clambering around off trail and not cause any environmental destruction. That's one concern. I also don't understand how they would be responsible for any damage that they do. It seems like they're not going to be responsible for that, as well as a lot of things that other people have pointed out, like they have their own land. Why do they need to be on the park's lands to do this? As someone who really enjoys the outdoors, especially in this kind of stressful times that we've been having with the pandemic and all those things, I like to go out in nature. One of the reasons I live in Washington is for the great natural resources that we have. And I would really personally, and I can only imagine other people would be very uncomfortable knowing that someone might be sneaking around with things that look like guns. If you happen to spot them, that would just feel really stressful as far as I can tell. So I want to thank you guys for letting the public have a voice in this, and hope you'll consider not permitting them and letting them use their own space. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Let's go ahead and unmute Diana Lindsay for her comment, followed by Peter Guerrero.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. I am a cancer patient, and the South Whidbey State Park was integral to my healing. I walked in it every day for 45 minutes, and instead of having 3 months to live, I've been alive for 15 years. We went on to form Healing Circles Langley, and in the process have done a lot of research on the health benefits of nature and, of course, exercise in how not only cancer patients recover, but also depression and mental illness. And I'm looking at a study right here, one more, high blood pressure. All of these require the ability to safely interact with nature. The immune system does not respond when it's in fight or flight. So I think it's really important to preserve these areas where those of us who are challenged in our health can recover. So I urge you to not allow this incursion into the state parks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diana. Let's go ahead and go to Peter Guerrero next, followed by Mary Gallagher. Peter, go ahead.
I'm Peter Guerrero. I'm with the North Olympic Group of the Sierra Club. The Washington State Sierra Club is on record on behalf of our 100,000 members and supporters in the state that the state park staff's recommendation, a determination of non-significance, is both flawed and ill-timed for the following reasons. First, as you heard, the Navy already owns miles of Washington shoreline in which to conduct training. Second, the planned training exercises will restrict public access to parks and pose risk of injury to persons, property, and wildlife. Third, a state park's determination of non-significance is contrary to its mission, as you've also heard from many of the previous speakers. Fourth, damage to our parks will be impossible to monitor and taxpayers will foot the bill. On this point, I would say the Navy claims it will notify law enforcement and park management before any training exercise, but a public records request reveals it has never done so during the 5 years it has held a permit. This leaves state park staff unable to monitor such exercises and makes it more difficult to evaluate environmental impacts after the fact. The Navy has further claimed it will accept no liability. I have to say that our state parks, as you well know, have been underfunded and are understaffed for years now. This will put those parks and our staff at a particularly burdensome situation in a very difficult time. Fifth, a state park's determination of non-significance is based on a flawed Navy final environmental assessment that failed to evaluate the effects of explosive devices, sonar, and other technologies on the region's critically endangered orca and salmon populations. Sixth, and finally, the state parks has failed to consider the impact on public health in light of COVID-19. Our parks are loved, they're well attended during this time, they're critical for our health and well-being. For all these reasons, the Sierra Club opposes the right of entry permit for the U.S. Navy, and I thank the commissioners for your time and consideration of this matter.
Thank you, Peter. Next up, we have Mary Gallagher. And after Mary Gallagher, it looks like we have Carol Borden, who wasn't on just earlier here, so we're going to get her slotted in. So Mary, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Mary Gallagher. I live a mile from Lake Wenatchee State Park. I buy a Discover Pass every summer and a Snow Park Pass every year. Our state parks are cherished destinations indeed. And I want to thank all the state park staff. I know how hard all of you work, especially our staff here at Lake Wenatchee. And I really want to appreciate all the volunteer commissioners. And you're meeting one of Washington State Park's core values by involving the public in policy development and decision making. So thank you for taking the time to hear public comments. Sometimes sitting down to write a letter just doesn't happen. So I'd ask you as the commissioners, you have the task of deciding the appropriateness of the military, which we have a wonderful military. I'm proud of our military. And yes, they need training, but really, military conducting special operations in 28 of our Washington state parks, cherished destinations, core value is stewardship. Does this proposal, please, each of you stop and ask yourself, does this proposal fall within the mission of state parks? Will this truly enhance the purpose of state parks? I think as commissioners, you need to decide, are the actions you decide on, do they enhance or do they infringe on the users? I'm opposed to military training in our state parks. And I hope that you take the consideration from everything you hear tonight and what's in your heart about these cherished lands and who the true users should be. Thank you.
Mary, thank you very much. Next up, we have Carol Borden, followed by Lee First. So Carol, please go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, commissioners, for meeting this evening and allowing the public to provide their comments. I live here in Anacortes, and I am active in hiking and fishing, bird watching, and also helping in the state parks and Washington Park or City Park, and volunteering here. And I certainly think that our state parks should be set aside continuously for the public to enjoy recreation. And that's why they were established. And so it seems to me that military operations are, you know, it doesn't seem right to have these Navy SEALs training in the state parks. I certainly wouldn't want to run into one. I dated one for 6 years, and I know how they are. And, you know, they're intense, and they leave no stone unturned. And they're great guys, and they do a great job out there. But I think that state parks is off limits. And I think that's important. You know, we have to have places to go to recreate. And like I say, they will be vicious in the parks. And they will be out there training to no end. So, you know, that comes with impacts to wildlife, birds, and also to the orcas and the salmon out there that already are impacted. So you have to make up your mind what you want to do. This is from one person in the city here of Anacortes that loves our park. So onward, and hope you vote against it. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, Carol. Next up for testifying is Lee First, and I'm not seeing Jessica Lawrenson on the meeting, but if you are on as one of the anonymous phone numbers there, please go ahead and hit *9 and we'll get you unmuted. And after Lee, we will move to Sheila Tunn. So Lee, please go ahead.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Lee First, and I am a resident of rural Grays Harbor County. I frequent West Haven, Westport Light, Grayland, Twin Harbors, and Cape Disappointment state parks as often as I can. I mostly have a series of questions tonight, which I hope someone from the Parks Department will answer for me at some point. We're in a pandemic. When I go to my local parks, I am faced with lots of signs telling me to social distance and wear a mask. Will the Navy SEALs be wearing masks? Will all the support staff be wearing masks? The SEPA does not adequately explain how the public will be informed about military training exercises. Will there be signs or some kind of warning? What kind of communication will be offered to the public who are camping or visiting? The SEPA is vague about exact steps that will be taken if the public enters an active training area. My overriding question is why? Conducting these military activities is inconsistent with the core values of the park systems. Trainees carrying realistic fake-looking weapons will clearly conflict with park rules where weapons are not allowed. Why does the Navy need these areas now? There's a description of the proposed trainings but it's not adequate and more specific information is needed. For example, small support vessels and small boats will be used. I have a feeling these aren't going to be so small. Exactly what kind of vessels and boats will be used and how large are they? I see I'm out of time, so I'm going to sign up. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lee. Next up, we have Sheila Tunn, followed by potentially Lori Keith, because I don't think I'm seeing Timothy or Joan on the line here. So Sheila, let's go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sheila Tunney, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak. I've been volunteering at Kama Beach State Park in the summer of 2019. We didn't do it last year. And I know that at the park that it's mostly a lot of families with young children who stay at the cabins overnight. And it's just a wonderful place to go. And I think a lot of people have said what I was going to say anyway, so I won't repeat it. But I just want to say I'm very uneasy about the Navy personnel practicing war games. I'd like to keep that out of the parks. And I would like to say one thing too, we have to pay to get to, the public has to pay the Discover Pass of $30 a year or $10 a day to go visit. And I don't know if that's been addressed, that the Navy is not paying, as far as I can see, they're not paying fees for this. And what about liability if someone does get harmed in the public? So I'm just going to keep it real short. And my closing comment is, I'd like to see real SEALs and not Navy SEALs in the state parks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Next up, we have Lori Keith, and I believe we missed Dinah Stinson earlier. So after Lori Keith, we'll move to Dinah Stinson. And again, Timothy or Joan, if you're on via phone and I'm not seeing your name, just the number there, please go ahead and raise your hand, *9 on the phone, and we can get you unmuted. So Lori, please go ahead.
Hi, I came to Washington State over 30 years ago, precisely because of the natural beauty of these amazing parks. And I consider South Whidbey State Park to be my gym, my health spa, and my church. 1 out of, I don't know the statistics, I've heard is 1 out of 5, something like that. Women have had some kind of sexual abuse. Most have experienced sexual harassment in many forms. I can accept that these SEAL trainees are highly trained and would not come after me, but that doesn't matter to my nervous system or that of many people who have suffered trauma. It's just the thought, the perception of a threat that can send the nervous system into fight or flight. The stress response, which is the bottom line factor in just about any kind of illness. These days, people are focused so much on screen time, technology, self-isolating indoors. So more and more people are frequenting the parks because they need it. It restores them. Most of us can attest to how good we feel after a walk in the woods or along the beach. There is science to support that the natural frequencies of the earth, the forest, trees, and the shoreline are calming to the overload of the techno-electronically screen-focused lives that so many of us are leading these days. I heard recently a statistic that suicide hotlines are up some 600%. People's mental illness and emotions are serious considerations. We go to the parks to heal. The idea of men hiding in the bushes, trying not to be seen by me, is a trigger for my stress, even if they aren't there, but might be. What if I want to change clothes and go for a dip, maybe a skinny dip, pee in the woods? No one is around, right? Or as a taxpayer, all this time considering this matter, management of the sure to come increased public outrage, managing a lawsuit that is promised to come, and the fact that local government will be liable for any mishaps that may happen.
Lori, your
I
time is up.
understand that when there's a share. Okay. Thank you very much. Please listen to your heart, and military does.
Thank you very much, Lori. Next, we're going to move on to Dinah Stinson, who we missed earlier. Dinah, or please correct me if I'm butchering your name. Go ahead, followed by Thomas Walker.
Perfect. Thank you, Tess. Commissioners, one of the two statutory purposes of national parks in the UK is to promote opportunities for the public understanding and enjoyment of the special qualities of the parks. Surely that is also part of what was intended in the US, in our setting aside of majestic, natural, wild land. Think of the last time you enjoyed yourself in a park that retains its wild nature. Perhaps you felt aliveness in your body, connection, freedom, and even peace with yourself and with creation. Peace. It's a life-enhancing state of being for all people. Many of us believe that military practices in public parks compromise and subtract from that special quality, a sense of peace, that which comes to us naturally from wild nature. When park goers become rowdy and play loud music, we say they are disturbing the peace. Likewise, should the Parks Commission allow military practices in our public places of restoration and rejuvenation, emotional and spiritual peace will likely for many people be disturbed. The wild nature of our parks affords far too many unique wellness benefits for us to compromise their full range of gifts by allowing cross-purpose activities, military activities, seen or unseen. Please say a forever no to military practices on public parklands. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Thomas Walker, followed by Joni Pansanera. And though actually, I think I'm not seeing Joni on, so it may actually be Ron Richards. So Thomas, you may begin.
Thank you. Yeah, Tom Walker, Whidbey Island. One of my favorite trails is along the top of that bluff at South Whidbey State Park that you've now marked in blue. My father-in-law is a retired Navy officer. I'm not against the military, but folks, I cannot imagine you would approve this proposal if you paused and considered for a moment the immense stress we have all been under this past year and the consequent dire need for peaceful recreation in nature without looking over our shoulders. COVID has kept us cooped up and isolated, many of us in grief from lost relatives and friends, many more unemployed or severely stressed financially, parents going nuts with their children home and needing to get outside on public lands, healthcare and essential workers tired to the bone, seniors scared to go anywhere inside and yearning for the peaceful outdoors, plus an election cycle that may have threatened our democracy, armed militias openly promoting insurrection, and you are seriously considering allowing hidden military presence in our public parks. It's unbelievable. More than creepy, it is unacceptably cruel to a public under severe stress and in need of recreation more than ever. Don't allow it. Don't shrink our parks to 1,000-foot buffers with the rest for the Navy. The military has plenty of space to practice war. Our public parks are supposed to be parks, period. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. Next up, we have Ron Richards, followed by Dave Anderson. So Ron, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity. The Navy's proposal is totally inconsistent with the public park purposes for which RCW 79A-05-305 says our state parks shall be acquired and managed. Chief among them is to maintain and enhance ecological, aesthetic, and recreational purposes. I cringe when I look at all the effort that has gone into this request, all the staff time and all the resources. I cringe when I listen to the conditions that are proposed and the staff time and resources that will be required to monitor compliance, if possible, with the permits in the future. None of this effort furthers your mandated duties under RCW 79A-05-305. I cringe at all the aspects of the Navy's proposal that will harm and diminish our state parks rather than maintain and enhance. Your own recommendations show very adverse events that could be caused by this proposal, such as allowing Navy staff to delay people in boats offshore an event in progress, and even worse, requiring Navy operatives to intervene to prevent injury to a park user. That condition admits the Navy's activities could well result in a park user being detained, if not injured. A previous speaker has mentioned that our new president and commander-in-chief is attempting to rebuild trust in our government. I've heard him repeatedly say he will always tell us the truth. Issuing a permit so clearly at odds with our statutory authority, as these requested permits would be, would reduce trust in our government and would be, both on your part and the Navy's, tantamount to not telling us the truth.
Thank you very much, Ron. Next, we have Dave Anderson, followed by David Jones. And then I'm going to do one last sweep of our list after that, just to make sure we don't have any other stragglers that had signed up previously. So Dave, please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. This is Dave Anderson. I live on South Whidbey down here. I'm going to take a little different tack from the rest of the people that have talked here. My point is that I learned the hard way being in politics for a brief time. Perception is reality. Think about that for a moment. What's the perception with the military in the parks? What is the perception that we've got in our mind nowadays, especially after watching a lot of ex-military and a lot of other guys who aren't like our military? I'm not saying that, but the perception of them charging up those steps, they were there to do no good. That is a perception. Now, as board members of the state parks, your responsibility is to the parks and the viability of the parks. Your revenues are going to fall if you approve this thing. You're going to have reduced revenue. You're going to have more staff time. You're going to be challenged by Ween in court. They usually win. The perception of women is that they'll be in more danger in the parks. The perception of like Lori Keith and Diana Lindsay goes there for her health reasons. There's probably guys that have PTSD that might be walking around in the trails at night trying to get some solitude into their mind, some meditation and so forth. One of the terms that you used in your leading up to this was, what is the appropriateness? The appropriateness is just not there because of the perception that if those guys are in the parks with their camouflage on and stuff over their face and everything, that you are in a certain kind of danger, whether it's true or not. Parks people might have done a great job on the mitigation. I worked with them when I was in the state legislature. I was on the Natural Resources Committee. I worked with them, and I went to a number of things where the board members were there. Got a lot of respect for those people. I'm sure they've done everything they can possibly do to try to mitigate the potential harmful effects. And I'm not even sure those harmful effects are there that much. But
hey, Dave, you're
okay,
your time limit.
I'm a politician. I can talk. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. All right. And next we have David Jones. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you and good evening, commissioners. Thanks to each of you for your service. Thanks for listening to my comments, especially after opening this meeting more than 3 hours ago. I'm the son of a U.S. Naval career officer. I'm the brother of a U.S. Naval career officer. I'm the neighbor of an amazing Navy SEAL. And all three of those individuals have served under fire. I was raised as a Navy brat, and I've grown up here in Washington State. So perhaps more than most people testifying this evening, I recognize, I value the essential role of the U.S. Navy in today's world. My wife and I frequently visit our state parks. We go there to recenter and to be reminded of our very small place in nature. And we probably are exactly who Commissioner Latimer was referring to when he wrote, "The outdoors provides health and renewal for people of all ages." Because for us, that health, that renewal comes from entering into a natural environment that is far removed from the distractions of our day-to-day world. In her report this evening, Jessica reminded each one of you that only you, not her SEPA review, not other mitigation plans that have been prepared by your staff, can advise you how to protect what visitors feel when they visit one of our state parks. Protecting that feeling, that's your responsibility. Commissioner Milner, think back to the feeling of solitude that's present in beautiful parks like Minnesota Boundary Waters, a place where you used to work, and maybe where you caught that beautiful fish that's behind you there on the wall. I would ask you, I'd ask your fellow commissioners to vote to protect and preserve that feeling of solitude and awe for every visitor who comes into a Washington park. I know the Navy has to continually train to stay sharp. But I'm concerned when I hear your staff working hard to make that kind of training possible in our state parks. Please deny this request. This is not a problem that you need to solve for the Navy. Thanks for your service. Thanks for your volunteer time and for listening tonight.
Thank you, David. So we have gone through our full list of folks who signed up. We are not, everyone here tonight signed up ahead of time, and there was a registration period, but I do want to make sure, just because sometimes people have technical difficulties or got called away by kids and they had signed up. I am going to do one last name call through the list, just to make sure we're not missing anybody before handing the meeting back over to Commissioner Milner to adjourn. So we'll do a little pause. Peter Morton, if you're here, and I'm not seeing you in this list, but if you join by phone, go ahead and hit *9 and get that hand raised, and we'll go ahead and get to you. Judith Akins, Deb Ramirez, and I'm just going to go through this list. If you hear your name and you're on, please do go ahead and use *9 on your phone. I think we do have a couple of folks who are kind of in on multiple devices, which is one of the reasons we're seeing some duplicates here, but just want to make sure we don't miss anybody. Janice Lorson, James Christie, Dusty Dion, Nora Cromley, Robert Mayberger, Zoe Hill, David Adams, Vicky Robin, Lang Russell, Phil Son, Jessica Lawrenson, Timothy Hazello, Joan Govidar, and Joni Panciera. So please go ahead. If we have somehow missed you, go ahead and press *9 or look for that hand raise button. I am looking for folks in the attendee list, and I'm not seeing you logged in, but we do really appreciate everyone coming in and providing comment tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Commissioner Milner.
Thank you, Tess. Can you hear me?
I can.
I want to thank everyone for taking the time to make their thoughts known on this issue and assure them that no one here, at least I can speak for myself, my mind is still open on this matter. And I want to pass on to you a comment sent to me by former Commissioner Pat Lance, who writes incredibly well prepared and delivered comments. I couldn't agree more. So thank you. And this meeting is adjourned.
And I did just see one note that comes through and related to how many folks were registered. And we did have 80 people signed up. And it looks like we had probably 3/4 of those folks decide to log in tonight. So thanks again. That's a lot of folks who care about this important issue.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice job, Tess.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah, thank you. Good job, Tess.
Are we starting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning?
Yes, 9 a.m. WebEx with Mahar and I.
Becky,
All
you're
right.
brutal.
Get that.
All right, we'll see y'all in the morning.
Bye.
Okay, get a good night's sleep.